promote him. And then Matt, you can change Larry's name to include planning commissioner.
Richard, I saw your comment and we will promote you when your item is up.
I'm actually the vice chair, not the planning commissioner.
Thank you.
I see David.
Oh, okay, great.
All right, we have everybody but David.
How about Bob McDonald?
We do have Mr. Bob. He just is too shy to show his face.
I'm sorry. I'm here. Here I am.
Good.
I'm just washing my dishes, so I'll have to get this back off. Love. Oh, is it 6 o'clock already? Crap. Okay. Sorry.
Chair Wellender, we're ready to start.
Well, very good. I'd like to welcome everybody to our January 13th, 2022 Planning Commission hearing. And at this point, I'd like to ask for roll call.
Yes, Commissioner Barbos,
Here.
Commissioner Bohar,
Here.
Commissioner McDonald,
Present.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Here.
Commissioner Wyrick,
Here.
Vice Chair Barnett, and Chair Wellender.
Yes,
Here, my mute was on.
I'd like to welcome everybody to our January. I don't like that tape voice.
Yeah,
Now getting an echo.
we'll figure that out. Just one moment.
Commissioner Barbo. Commissioner Bohar.
Bob from KSCY, we're getting some background noise.
Who is it? Everybody or just one person?
Somebody have their
Everybody's
TV
hearing
on.
it.
It's a recording of a roll call.
We're hearing the rebroadcast. We'll figure that out. One moment. Bob from KSCY, we're getting some background noise.
Who is it? Everybody or just one person?
Somebody have their
Hearing it.
It's a recording of. We're hearing the rebroadcast.
Can you hear me, Wendy?
Yes, I can. We're still hearing the echo.
Okay, the echo might be coming from somebody's computer. Does somebody have the YouTube on or something? Or?
Does someone have? Oh, I do. I have the box cast on. Oh, well, that's rather embarrassing. Okay. So,
Any echo? 1, 2, 1, 2.
let's try it. Oh my goodness. It was me the whole entire
Yeah.
time.
No
Thank
problem.
you, Bob. Okay, so I got to the roll call. Everyone's here. Carry on.
Indeed. And at this point, I'd like to request Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Barnett, would you please lead it?
Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of
United States of
America,
America.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
the nation.
indivisible, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. Okay, as is apparent, we are broadcasting this via Zoom as well as on television. And we have a fairly full agenda this evening. I hope things will go smooth. And although the broadcast is on Zoom and on television, the Zoom part of it, I do request that we all maintain a good level of civility and respect as we go through these various items. Having said that, now I'd like to go ahead and open up to the public and give the public an opportunity to speak to any item that is not appearing on the agenda.
I see no hands being raised.
Okay. With that said, we're going to move on then to the review and acceptance of the agenda. I do have 2 recommended changes, but I'd like to hear anyone else's recommendations before I speak. Okay, seeing none, I would like to recommend that we, after agenda item 8.1, we bring up agenda item 9.2, and that's driven principally by the efficiency of time with our city legal counsel. The second item that I'd like to throw out for consideration and vote is to switch at the end of our meeting, item number 12 up above items 10 and 11. And it's just for the sequencing of time, and it will become very evident when it takes place. So those are the two suggestions, changes I'd like to request. Do I have any, do I have a second on that?
I have a question. Is item 9.1 does not need the city attorney involved in?
Um,
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
as
All
our
right.
director just said,
You know,
yes.
Okay, then I second it.
Okay,
Yes, Steve.
just one comment real quick. I think it would be great if the city attorney could be around for 9.1 because I have some comments about it that would be nice for him to hear.
In that case, Mr. Chair, I'd recommend that we do that after, well, take 9.1 first and then 9.2. We were just trying to be economical, but that'd be fine.
Okay, well, with that, then I'm going to amend my recommendation, and that is we will keep with the sequence will be 8.1 to 9.2 and then to 9.1. And then we'll continue as it is listed, with the exception of once we get down to items 10, 11, and 12, I'd like to have 12 precede 10 and 11. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Barbos,
Yes.
Commissioner Bohar,
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Wyrick,
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett,
Aye.
and Chair Wellender.
Yes,
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously.
very good. Moving on, do we have any late correspondence?
Yes, all the late correspondence that was received was uploaded to the document center on the city's website.
Okay, very good. We then are moving on to the consent calendar, and as is noted in our agenda packet, we have just one item on the consent calendar. Do we have any reason to pull it? If not, do we accept the consent calendar as written?
Move to approve.
Second,
Second.
roll call?
Commissioner Barbos,
Yes.
Commissioner Bohar,
Abstain?
okay, Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Wyrick,
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett,
Aye.
and Chair Wellender.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 6 with 1 abstention.
Okay, we are now moving into the public hearing portion of this evening, and we'll be starting with item number 8.1, which is a discussion and possible action to deny an appeal by Heather Martindale of the Planning Community Services Director's interpretation made on May 7th, 21, relating to the legal non-conforming status of a pergola, trellis / arbor located at 121 France Street. And with that,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
if I may, I have a record to make at the appropriate time.
I'm sorry. Yes, go right ahead, Mr. White.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have chosen to recuse myself from agenda item 8.1 for absolutely no reason other than to spare the city of Sonoma from the necessity of spending even one more minute addressing the claims of this appellant going forward. I do not and will not recuse myself simply at the pleasure of an appellant in the absence of some other legal or procedural reason, especially in light of the tasteless way that this appellant lodged a request. That is my record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiler. So noted. And with that said, I would like to ask for the staff report at this point.
Mr. Chair, thank you. This is David. Would like to have Wendy promote Mr. Walter as a panelist. I think that's the correct process here. Jeff is available and listening at this point. Wendy, is that possible? Can you do that?
Promote Jeff Walter?
Yes.
Yes, he's a panelist.
I don't see him on there.
Oh, okay. I
Is
don't,
anybody else? Maybe it's just me.
he may need to accept. Oh, there he is. Okay.
Make sure we got a live guy. Jeff, are you there?
He's muted.
Well, I'll tell you what, I can proceed while we work that out. I know he can hear because I was just on the phone with him a few minutes ago. So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to follow briefly the outline that's in your staff report without going over it word for word, just to give you a bit of background. On March the 10th of this past year, a formal complaint was provided by code enforcement officers to Beth Harper, who resides at 121 France Street. In that letter that was presented to her, there was a discussion about the fact that there was no building permit issued for that trellis pergola arbor, and that it also extends beyond the property line. Following that, on May the 7th, I wrote a letter that was in response to, I believe, one or two letters that you as commissioners and the city council and others received from the appellant, Mrs. Martindale. I responded on your behalf as a planning commission, trying to understand the basis of an appeal that she was wanting to have of staff's administrative actions. In her original correspondence before my response on May 7th, it did not outline what it was that she wanted to appeal. And so in my letter on May 7th, I determined that the structure was a legal non-conforming use, and I did not choose to address the issue of the location of that pergola arbor trellis because I had no information determining where the property line was. It's not like we go around doing surveys all the time. On May 14th, in response to that letter, an appeal was filed by Ms. Martindale, and that was a timely appeal. As that was under consideration by staff on June the 21st, Beth Harper filed an application to do some repair work and also to relocate the pergola arbor trellis to her property with respect to recognizing that Ms. Martindale had completed a survey of the property by Pridmore and Associates. That basically placed the appeal basically placed the building permit on hold until its resolution. In the analysis section of your staff report tonight, we have made that assumption that the Pridmore survey is accurate and had no reason to disbelieve it or think that it was an error. And so that we're working from the framework that the trellis does straddle the Martindale property. Also, in our staff report, we discussed the timing of the construction of the pergola arbor trellis, that it predates the city having building and development requirements, that the structure was commenced somewhere in the 1930s and 1940s, certainly prior to 1948 when the city had its first building and zoning code requirements. In determining that the pergola arbor trellis, the structure is a legal non-conforming use, staff found that the subject structure was in existence for at least 5 years, or continuous years, and it was clearly visible and hostile to the resident of 115 France Street, the appellant, Ms. Martindale, that it was actually built prior to the adoption of any zoning or development code that did make it non-conforming. That code we're using for the sake of discussion is the year 2003, when the basis of the body of what we have in today's code forms the regulatory provisions of our municipal code. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission deny the appeal based on our findings and uphold the Planning and Community Services Director's interpretation, recognizing the pergola arbor trellis as a legal non-conforming structure and provide direction to the applicant, or rather the Beth Harper and her counsel, to draft a resolution for review by the city attorney and myself, such that we can then return to your planning commission at your next meeting on February the 10th to have that resolution adopted, should your commission uphold the action of myself. That concludes my staff report, other than to introduce Mr. Wayne Wyrick, that is our chief building official, as he has some historical context to provide to your commission about the property, as he was once a former owner of that property. This concludes my part of the staff report, Mr. Chair, and turn it over to Mr. Wyrick.
Thank you.
Wendy, would you be able to promote Wayne, please?
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. I'm here tonight to provide a brief overview of my knowledge of the existence of the trellis as a former owner of the home located at 121 France Street. In 1985, my wife and I purchased three adjoining parcels located at 121, 125, and 131 France Street. And at the time, the only home that existed was the existing home that was built in the mid-1920s at 121 France Street. We were told by the sellers that the property was formerly owned by the Hayward family, who had a small nursery on the three parcels. And in fact, at the time that we purchased the properties, a large old trellis covered significant portions of all three of the parcels to provide shade for scores of camellia trees that were there, along with a support of a very large wisteria tree that was in the backyard of the home. During almost the 2 years that my wife and I lived in the home at 121 France Street, an old trellis projecting over the west driveway existed to support an old trumpet vine and portions of the old wisteria tree. From my perspective as a former owner and the city's building official, I found no evidence that would suggest that the trellis has not existed in its existing location on the property for many, many years. It's my belief that it was likely built sometime in the 30s or 40s, as Mr. Score has already indicated. From a building code perspective, the California existing building code allows for the repair of these types of structures, provided that the work does not make the building less complying than it was before the repair was undertaken. I want to thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I believe at this time, before I ask the Ms. Martindale to come forward and speak, I want to see if any commissioners have any brief questions for staff, or if you wish to hold your questions till after Ms. Martindale or Ms. Harper, so be it.
Mr. Chair, I believe the city attorney would like to make a couple of comments.
Oh, please. So go ahead, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of questions of Wayne. Wayne, the property had, when you bought it, trellises in the back of the property spanning the three parcels you just mentioned. Were they of the same style, wood, and apparent age as the trellis covering the driveway?
Yes, I believe so. I think that the old trellis structure at the time that I was living there was in a relatively poor condition, but it extended and in fact touched the trellis structure that extended over the driveway. So the reason for that is that the large wisteria tree, which may have been one of the largest in California at the time, it extended, the wisteria vine extended over three properties. And it was located in the rear of the home at 121. So it was actually, the trellis structure on the driveway was actually helping to support the wisteria vine. And so I believe that it was all constructed at a similar time.
Did you remove any of those trellises while you own the property?
I did. The trellises in the rear yard and the trellis that extended over the driveway, there were portions of that trellis that I did remove. The section of the trellis that continues to exist was not removed.
Thank you.
Okay, if we have then no questions for staff, I'd like to welcome Ms. Martindale to come forward and to speak.
I've promoted her and she should be able to speak now. I see.
Great.
Am I able to be heard right now?
I'm sorry, hello?
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you, Heather. Yes, we can hear you.
First off, I want to find out how much time I have for my presentation.
Well, normally we give 10 minutes, but if you need a little bit longer, so be it.
I would like a little bit longer, and I think I put something in the chat. I want to make a record that while Mr. Storer mentioned that he didn't have any boundary information, I have record that they reached out, code enforcement, to the surveyor, so they're well aware of the boundary, the legal boundary survey. But I wanted to read what I prepared, and I think it'll outline my thoughts on this. So
Okay.
I might take about 10 to 15 minutes, so I will go ahead and start. My name is
Martindale. Ms. Martindale, before you speak, this is Jeff Walter. Are you speaking into a speaker or some other device because you're creating a bit of an echo chamber that's sometimes difficult to understand?
I'm speaking into the computer on my audio that I use all day for work, and there shouldn't be any issues on my end.
Yeah, I'm hearing that echo as well.
If that's the best you can do, so be it.
My other option would be to call in.
Well, why don't you go continue and see if the
Okay.
disruption is significant.
All right. I will start. My name is Heather Martindale. I'd first like to leave the planning commission. I'd like to have the planning commission take note on a few items. In visiting the online planning commission agenda this morning, there's no mention of the November 18th, 2021 planning commission meeting. Why is that? During that November 18th, 2021 meeting, I expressed my discontent in the city of Sonoma's lack of transparency and the dissemination of information, and after repetitive California Public Record Act requests. The city of Sonoma has both denied and shielded me access to documentation and records while liberally working in concert with Ms. Harper and council. They have continued to disregard my request, and even after I made a public plea to Mr. David Storer during the November 18th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting, they ignored me. I hope you all remember my passion and my property for my property in this matter. Unequally and with a strong aroma of collusion, the city of Sonoma has obviously worked in lockstep with Ms. Harper and her attorney to ensure that their post facto justification of a legal non-conforming structure determination was methodically and meticulously prepared for your Jim Jones Kool-Aid ingestion tonight. As mentioned in the November 18th, 2021 meeting, I reviewed every single previous public hearing agenda item back to 2017, of which there is over 205 items, and the only agenda item listed with the word deny was for the meeting item number 8.2 on the November 18th, 2021 Planning Commission agenda, where it reads, quote, discussion and possible action to deny an appeal by Heather Martindale of Planning and Community Services Directors, interpretation made on May 7th, 2021. Tonight's agenda item for this matter is 8.1 and continues to contain the word deny. In the limited time I was given to read and respond here tonight to the posted staff report and related documents with Ms. Harper, the underlying theme is cover up, corruption, collusion, misdirection, and all designed to distract the Planning Commission of what is really happening with this trellis structure. I would also pose these questions to the Planning Commission for your memory as you move through tonight's meeting, and challenge you to ask yourselves, why is the city of Sonoma so hell-bent in their staff report to demand a denial of my appeal? And why is it so important of the city of Sonoma to gain your agreement to give the illegal structure a status of legal non-conforming? What is the city's underlying interest in protecting this trellis? I think we all know the answer to these questions, and it does not take an IQ over room temperature to figure out. As I provided in my email message from this morning, Ms. Harper constructed the current structure without a proper building permit in 2001. Wayne Reyff perpetuated the impropriety of the structure as a adjoining residing neighbor and as the former owner of 121 France Street. Mr. Reyff was intimately involved with Ms. Harper's renovations, remodels, addition, lot adjustments, and trellis construction in the few years after acquiring 121 France Street. Wayne Reyff and Ms. Harper were both adjacent neighbors and friends. But Wayne Reyff was also a City of Sonoma building official and signing off on Ms. Harper's remodel building permit. Wayne Reyff breached in his expected fiduciary and professional duties as a city official that every resident is entitled to expect, including me, when a city officially formally owns or has a vested interest in the real estate at hand. The elephant in the room here is that Wayne Reyff made a grave mistake as a building official by sweeping the permit process for Ms. Harper under the rug. Wayne Reyff has placed the city of Sonoma at risk, and the city knows it, I know it, and I know all of you know it. Ms. Harper is furthering the narrative by saying she was doing a, quote, favor by increasing the height of the trellis for emergency access in 2001. There are, quote, no favor codes in the SMC that allow anyone to evade or circumvent the building permit process. Retrospectively, the biggest favor my neighbor could have done is to provide a clear and obstructive easement access and removal of the entire structure. Ms. Harper's unhealthy relationship with her temple bind should not trump the safety of my property or her dominant easement tenant property owner. In reading the staff report, I'd like to highlight the city's word gymnastics and legal case law word salad, as it is more deserving than gymnast Nadia Comaneci in the 1976 Olympics. But I appeal to the Planning Commission to not let this distract you from the real issue at hand, which is that the current structure was illegally built in 2001. All the city's attempt to redirect you towards case law garbage and reference is only in direct proportion in their futile and desperate attempt to convince you Ms. Harper has ownership of the eastern portion of my property and as a means as to justify the fraudulent actions by the city and to protect them. Under no legal circumstance is the city to falsely lead the Planning Commission to give away my property rights and play the role of the Sonoma County Superior Court. The acceptance of the city's denial request would validate the city's authority to do so. It is not by accident that in a letter dated March 19, 2021 on page 5, provided by Ms. Harper's counsel to the City Code Enforcement Office, which states, given its obvious old age, the trellis may as well as be a legal non-conforming use and therefore lawful, question mark. And then Mr. Hicks refers to chapter 19.82 of the Sonoma Municipal Code and writes, have you inquired into or investigated that possibility? And just like that, I received a letter dated May 7th from the city of Sonoma, and in just 33 words at the end of the letter, and with no context or explanation, Mr. Storer writes, quote, as pertaining to the trellis arbor fence structure in question in your email located at 121 France Street, it is my determination that the structure is a legal non-conforming structure as provided for in SMC 19.82. I should also note there is no coincidence in the code enforcement reaching out to my licensed surveyor on May 7th for a surveyor map as well. As I further reviewed the city's staff report, it revealed a letter sent to the city of Sonoma by Richard Hicks dated October 19th, 2021, outlining a bunch of legal case law rubbish and rabbit hole justification analyses for the city of Sonoma to use it as a quote reason to deem the structure as legal non-conforming. I find it revolting that in a letter dated to me on August 27, 2021, by Mr. Storer and sent to me, and along with all my exhausting SIPRAT requests, that Mr. Storer writes, and I quote, "Further, we have been in contact with Beth Harper's legal counsel and anticipate receiving a response from him regarding the merits of your appeal, and will also be provided to the Planning Commission at the hearing. His documentation will be public record and available to you upon receipt." And did Mr. Storer or Rebecca Barr provide me with the October 19th letter by Ms. Harper's counsel? Absolutely not. And even after my public plea to Mr. Storer at the November 18th Planning Commission meeting, as well as a follow-up email later that evening, they ignored me. And why was all my appeal documentation applied to Ms. Harper and not vice versa? I hope the Planning Commission recognizes and acknowledges the unfair, biased treatment I have received from the city of Sonoma with respect to my property and their illegal actions. The entire staff report relies on the regurgitation of Ms. Harper's attorney's false premises. The staff report fails to cite one development code application and their justification of the legal non-conforming structure status. Additionally, the only response I have received from the city was by the way of buying this $400 appeal to get answers and information from the city of Sonoma. This is not how our city should operate. In closing, I'd like to remind you of the overarching theme and reality of what the city of Sonoma is trying to accomplish. And it is that Wayne Wyrick and Ms. Harper made a terrible mistake, and it has caught up to them. I am an innocent property owner, and I should not be before the Planning Commission appealing an illegal structure at the fault of the city building department and the adjacent property owner. I request the Planning Commission to do the right thing and uphold my appeal, and not to deem the illegal structure as a legal structure, and not to continue to aid and abet in the corruptive behaviors. Thank you.
Very good.
Mr. Chair, this is David. I just have a couple of comments to respond to some of the things I've heard. I'd be happy to do that now, or we could certainly wait until after you've heard from Beth Harper, Mr. Hicks, Beth Harper's counsel. That would be your prerogative.
I'd like to go ahead and just stay noted, and you'd be happy to share it, but I'd like to give Mr. Hicks and Ms. Harper an opportunity to speak. So that's my preference at this point. So with that, if you would, Wendy, allow either Mr. Hicks or Ms. Harper to speak, please.
Yes, they've both been promoted as panelists.
Okay, very good. Ms. Harper, Mr. Hicks, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me all?
Indeed.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Richard Hicks. I represent Elizabeth Harper, who owns 121 France Street. For your information, Ms. Harper is on the Zoom meeting this evening. On October 19th, 2021, we submitted a comprehensive letter and 15 exhibits in response to the appeal of Ms. Martindale, accompanied by a statement signed by Ms. Harper. It is included in your agenda packet. In summary, the history of this trellis on Ms. Harper's property dates back to at least the 1940s and more likely than not, the 1930s. It represents a piece of our town's heritage. The historical records we have located confirms what Wayne Wyrick informed me in March of last year, and this evening informed you that the trellis, or that Ms. Harper's property was once the site of a nursery called Hayward Gardens that gained wide acclaim for the development and growing of camellias by James J. Hayward and his wife. The trellis in question is what remains of the trellising installed by the Haywards to protect and shade the camellia plants from the sun. We have provided those historical records, principally copies of old articles Ms. Harper obtained from the Sonoma Valley Historical Society and the archives for the Sonoma Index Tribune, including an article in the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Those records support what has been related about the history of the property, the camellia nursery, and the trellis. We contend that the trellis conforms to the current requirements of the present-day Sonoma Municipal Code, and it's both legal and conforming, but for sake of discussion, even if it does not conform to the present-day requirements, given its history, we concur with Director Stoer's determination and the recommendation of staff and the city attorney that the trellis is entitled to legal non-conforming status. Accordingly, we request that Ms. Martindale's appeal be denied. Early last year, Ms. Harper was anticipating that issues that had arisen with respect to the trellis could be resolved in neighborly discussions with her neighbor, Ms. Martindale. A recent survey commissioned by Ms. Martindale at that time suggested to everyone's surprise that this trellis might slightly encroach over the property line onto Ms. Martindale's property. If one accepts the Pridmore survey as a correct depiction of the property line as described in the formal legal descriptions to the deeds to the parties' properties, some of the vertical posts for the trellis extend almost 4.5 inches over the Pridmore line, and some of the upper horizontal beams extend over the line by almost 22 inches. The vast majority of the trellis, without question, is on Ms. Harper's property. Thinking that that was a matter for discussion for resolution between neighbors, Ms. Harper was disappointed when Ms. Martindale decided to elevate their discussions by leveling and registering a formal complaint against Ms. Harper with the city of Sonoma, which triggered code enforcement proceedings. I am confident that if we pursued quiet title litigation in the Sonoma County Superior Court against Ms. Martindale, we would prevail in establishing the right to a prescriptive easement, confirming that that right has existed since dating back to the 1930s. In our view, the slight encroachment, though, that exists is not worth straining neighborly relations or spending tens upon tens upon tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees and costs to litigate such a matter. Therefore, what we proposed in terms of resolving the code enforcement complaint was to submit an application for a building permit to repair the trellis, which is in need of repair, and do so in a way that would remove that small portion of the trellis that extends over the property line onto Ms. Martindale's property, as shown by the Pridmore survey, and suggest that as a practical, reasonable method of resolving the situation. In a conversation I had with Robert Smith, the city's prosecutor and chief building official, he agreed that was a reasonable resolution, so the application was submitted. At this time, we are waiting for the city to respond to the building permit application, which has effectively been held up by this appeal. I could go over and recite in detail what the newspaper articles say. It's all in my letter. You have it in the packet. I really don't see the need to do that this evening unless there are questions that any of you have about that history. I would note in particular, there's an April 2, 1950 Press Democrat article, though, that talks about this very trellis and the camellia plants, and indicates that those plants had been there 17 or 20 years, dating back to the 1930s. All of the evidence show that the use of the Ms. Harper's property in question for a trellis type structure of this type dates back more likely than not to the 1930s. In reviewing the staff report that was put together by the Planning and Community Services Department and the city attorney, I agree with the analysis of the law on prescriptive easement that is set forth there. You will find that on page 16, starting on page 15 to 16 and on of your packet. It talks about the law of prescriptive easements. It says, in order to establish an easement by prescription, it must be shown that the easement was used continuously for a period of 5 years. Clearly, that was the case long before we had our first codes, our zoning code and our building code in 1948 and 1949. Possessed in a manner that was open, notorious, and clearly visible to the owner. Again, that was obvious. And hostile and adverse to the owner. The only thing I would add to that discussion is that that reference goes on to say a prescriptive easement may be acquired by the required use, even though the user is acting under a mistaken belief that he or she owns the property or had a legal right to use the easement. Here, until the recent Pridmore survey, everyone thought, Ms. Harper included, that the trellis was located entirely on her property. That belief is likely shared by all the prior owners of the property, including James Hayward, who built the trellis. This is a classic case where there is, dating back many years, a lawful prescriptive easement, and therefore, when our first zoning ordinance was adopted in 1948, the building code in 1949, this was a lawful legal use. And even if it did not conform to the requirements of the codes, it was entitled to legal non-conforming status that has existed up to the present. Interestingly, if you examine the 1948 zoning ordinance, you won't find any provisions with which the trellis does not conform to. The one provision that has been cited, that there is a prohibition against a structure extending over a property line, we don't find in the city's zoning ordinance until 2003. That's over 60 years after this trellis was first installed. In terms of setback requirements, we look at that. This is all covered in my letter. The setback requirements for accessory structures, the first requirements that might arguably apply to this trellis structure didn't exist in the code until 1997. So when you look at all of the facts and circumstances and the law, and I could go on and on and on, but it is covered in my letter in some detail because we took this seriously. This is entitled to legal non-conforming status, and we would encourage the Planning Commission to deny the appeal. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. At this point, I think I will give Director Storer an opportunity to make some comments.
Mr. Chair, I see that Mr. Walter would like to make a couple of comments before I just make mine one.
Please, go ahead, Mr. Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Hicks, does your client wish to speak?
She's more than happy to address the commission if there are any questions. She's asked that I speak on her behalf, but she's here, and I told her that if the members of the commission might want to ask her something, she's certainly available to do that if anyone would like that. But I tried to put forth everything that she wanted me to put forth.
Secondly, we are hoping that you will be prepared, if the commission agrees with you on this appeal, to prepare a first draft of the findings that might be appropriate. Would you be prepared to do that for us?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Storer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to point out that there is a process by which a member of the public may file a request for public records. And I believe Ms. Martindale did do that on several occasions. And speaking with the city clerk, she did tell me that she has responded to them all, other than one that is still under review. The way in which Ms. Martindale requested public records at the meeting does not meet the criteria, I believe, and I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong by our legal counsel. One last commentary point, and that is, Mr. Hicks mentioned it, with respect to the zoning code that was in effect at the time, in 2001, excuse me, when the repairs, 2 sets of repairs were conducted by Beth Harper. The zoning code at the time was adopted in 1997, which required a discretionary permit called a use permit for any use or structure that was proposed to be expanded, enlarged in size or capacity, extended to occupy a greater area or increase in intensity. It was my determination that the maintenance and repair work did not require those permits. And further, that same municipal code that was in effect at the time did authorize the normal maintenance, end quote, and repair of any non-conforming use or structure. So that provides some context, and that concludes my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go ahead. We won't open up to the public yet. We'll give commissioners a chance to ask questions of the two speakers. Mr. Barnett.
Thank you, Chair Wellender. My question, Mr. Hicks, is that if I understand Ms. Harper's offer, it's to remove the structural members of the trellis that are extending over the property line. Does that include, I think you mentioned, the 4.5 inches that the upright posts occupy?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Commissioner Vice Chair Barnett.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? Okay, seeing none, that I'd like to take this. Oh, Mr. Walter, go ahead.
Yes, Vice Chair Barnett's question prompted in my mind a clarification about today's proceedings. It's very limited. It's just to determine whether or not the planning director's finding of non-conforming use is supported by the evidence. The issue of issuing a building permit to remedy the encroachment is subject to another proceeding, and that's not for the commission's determination tonight. So the only question you're being asked tonight to resolve is whether or not Mr. Store's determination of legal non-conforming status was appropriate.
Very good. Thank you. I believe, unless someone can correct me, it's appropriate now to open this up to the public for comment. So Wendy, please be the orchestrator.
Yes, so Chair Wellender, I don't see any hands being raised to request to speak.
Okay, seeing none, then I'll close the public portion, and I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. And I will recognize either your hand or that cute little yellow icon hand. So take your choice. Yes, Ms. O'Neill.
I was looking for the little yellow hand, but I'm out of Zoom practice. I apologize.
Not at all.
So I just want to get a couple of comments, and they can be added into the dialogue before we make a decision here. But it's clear that this arbor and this trumpet vine have been around for a lot longer than either of these ladies have owned their property. Beth Harper bought hers in 1998. Heather Martindale bought hers in 2003. It's been sitting there for all of that time. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, Mr. Chair, that we heard tonight.
Okay. Okay, that's my only question right now. Thank you.
Okay. Who else would like to speak? Yes, Mr. Barbos.
Yes, I think the evidence support the determination by the planning director is in the record and is consistent with what Mr. Hicks said tonight. So I'm of the opinion that this is a legal non-conforming use. And I'm just disappointed that the situation between two neighbors in our town got to the point where this proceeding was necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Barbosa. Anyone else? Mr. Barnett. Go right ahead.
Unless it's out of order, I would make a motion to deny the appeal by Heather Martindale, the Planning and Community Services Director's interpretation made on May 7th, 2021, relating to the legal non-conforming status of the pergola trellis located at 121 France Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Barbos,
Yes.
Commissioner Bohar,
Aye.
Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett,
Aye.
Chair Wellender.
Yes,
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously.
thank you very much. Give me just a second to get reorganized. Okay, as was approved, we're going to do this agenda shuffle, and now we'll be going to agenda item 9.2, which is discussion and consideration and provide comments and direction to staff regarding an urgency ordinance, adding Title 19 to Section 19.50.140 regarding timeshares to the City of Sonoma's Municipal Code. And with that said, I'd like to request staff's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is David. I'll go ahead and make that brief presentation. Currently, our municipal code does not contain any regulation governing the use of property as timeshares, meaning that as it's non-enumerated, these are prohibited throughout the city. However, due to the rise in fractional ownership concepts, there may be ambiguity regarding whether fractional home ownership uses constitute a prohibited timeshare or an allowed residential use. And as such, what we've done is defined timeshares broad enough to allow us essentially to have them only in commercial zones, and that then even being part of the residential component requirements of either the commercial zone or the mixed use zone. The basis for passing an urgency ordinance can be, I can provide those to you with respect to the housing crisis in the state and as such, but the ordinance that we have provided to you tonight will be going to our city council on the 19th of this month. And what we would like to do tonight is provide that to you and get direction and comment back so that I can provide that, the city attorney and I can provide that to the council on the 19th. What would then happen is upon its adoption, that would be then in effect until the time that we come back to your commission with a regular ordinance in February, and then later again to the council, a regular ordinance on February 23rd, and then March the 2nd, which ordinance itself, regular ordinance, would then supersede the urgency ordinance. The ordinance that we've prepared for you provides for timeshares with an approval of the use permit. And that would again be as part of the commercial component in a commercial district and also in the mixed use zone. As far as alternative actions that you could take, and ultimately the council could also take, would be to direct staff to amend the urgency ordinance that we presented to only allow timeshares in the commercial zones and strike them within mixed use as part of that residential component, or to prohibit them timeshares throughout the city in its entirety. This concludes staff's report, and look forward to your comments such that I can provide them to the council on the 19th. This concludes staff's report.
Mr. Barnett, go right ahead.
Mr. Starr, am I correct in my understanding that a timeshare would not be subject to transient occupancy tax of any kind?
I believe it would be, but I'm not sure. I'll defer to city attorney on that.
Well, it's not a hotel, and currently the transient occupancy tax applies to lodgings, and you in your statement even referred to these timeshares as comprising potentially an element of a residential component in a commercial district, or even so. I think that the issue is that I need to get clarification about the application of timeshares in relationship to the transient occupancy tax.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. Ms. O'Neill.
Hey, raise my hand both ways this time. Two questions. The first is, should we include the phrase fractional ownership in addition to timeshares? Because as fractional ownership is different than a timeshare, and I'm wondering if we can and how we can include that we are not allowing fractional ownership sales. And that would be a sale of any property with less than 25% of full ownership. So that's the first comment. I'll pause there, and then I have a second one.
Yeah, I spoke with Dave Rudeman, not specifically about the language terminology, but I defer to legal counsel as it comes to we're certainly in an area where this is new policy, so to speak, throughout the state.
Yeah, I would like to see if we could include that phrase fractional ownership / timeshare. That's one. The other is I would definitely be in favor of limiting this strictly to the commercial zone, because I can think of several housing, what do we call them? Housing potential sites. One of which is First Street East, where a few years ago a hotel was proposed, and that is zoned MX, and I could see that being somebody taking advantage of it and putting a timeshare in there, and that is an MX zone. And I think it's really, it was planned always to be a housing area. So I would want to eliminate the MX zone from this allowable area. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're referring to housing opportunity sites, Commissioner O'Neill. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. McDonald, before I get to you, Mr. Walter, can you comment at all whether or not we can legally add, broaden the definition to include fractional ownerships?
I think that the commissioner's recommendation was more or less how to entitle timeshare, because timeshare interest is actually defined in the ordinance. And I think it covers what we all believe to be fractional ownership. So I don't see a problem with calling this a timeshare / fractional interest ordinance and include fractional interest in the term timeshare and defined in the same fashion.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. I want to piggyback on some of the comments from the previous commissioners as it relates to impact fees. Just broadening the discussion impact fees. If this is considered it's not a hotel unit, it's a house or a unit that's owned by somebody or by a group of people, would the city then consider a housing impact fee for each unit that's constructed? And I'm getting the sense that if it was in the commercial zone, it could be theoretically some like a Four Seasons hotel that somebody owns the unit and then they can rent them out. But it's actually owned by somebody and purchased by somebody or a group of people. So it seems to be a gray area as to how we would assess creating an impact fee for something like that. And also, if these are considered units that are sold and purchased, would we be able to use or count those towards our housing supply if we were to look at the broader picture of state requirements for building housing, or would we be excluded from that? And so those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Barbos.
You're muted, Steve.
You're still muted. There you go.
I have a question as to the intent behind the language. Where it talks about the timeshare use shall be permitted as part of the commercial component in a commercial zoning district and in a mixed use zoning. I understand that to refer to the use of it independent of the housing requirement that would otherwise have to be waived. So in other words, if somebody came in and did not get a housing waiver, they'd still have to have 50% residential housing to go with the whatever percentage of the land they intend to use for this timeshare. And so that's important to me to get clear on that. And then the other question I had was along the lines of the points raised by both Mr. Barnett and McDonald. If it's not subject to, if a share of a timeshare interest in this is not subject to TOTs, could we impose some sort of an impact fee that would benefit ultimately our Affordable Housing Trust Fund for use of land for this purpose?
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Barbos. Mr. Bohar.
I see some issues with commercial allowance in commercial zones, which of course includes MX zones, some of which were outlined by material we were sent. This is for Jeff Walter, I suppose. Are there any legal issues to our prohibiting this in the entire town?
That's unclear and is one of the issues currently being litigated with the city of St. Helena. And that's why our ordinance doesn't propose a blanket ban. We are proposing a more modest risk approach in allowing them, but only in commercial districts, so that those districts that are set aside for residential would not be usurped by the proliferation of these types of ownership units where we need to actually have long-term permanent residency being the prevailing form of occupancy. So the long-winded answer is I don't know if it's legally possible just to ban these types of ownership properties entirely in the city. This proposal is a more middle of the road approach.
Okay. Well, thank you. I can't address the sensitivities of that, but if I was given the choice, I don't think that I would want to support the timeshares in the MX zoning. I have a lot of reservation about the commercial as well, but if I had to choose, I suppose I'd do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bohart. Mr. Barnett.
Yes, thank you. I don't see how a timeshare could be subject to the TOT because it is essentially the purchase of a share in a property, not necessarily technically even a share. It's the purchase of some time in the use of a property. The charges for the time of the use of the property are not separated. In other words, when you get involved with a timeshare, you purchase a block of time, which is for which you pay a price. And that price may in fact over time vary depending on when you buy into a timeshare and how many other participants are in a timeshare. This is, to me, a timeshare is basically a vacation rental in other clothing. And my concern about seeing the timeshares in the commercial zones is there's actually going to be a temptation to convert some commercial properties to timeshares. And I think that this neither would contribute to the affordable housing helping provide solutions and funding to the affordable housing problem, because unless the city's entitled to assess an affordable housing trust fund fee to these applications, nor would it obviously provide anything in transient occupancy taxes, because there's no invoice, there's no transaction that crosses the counter with a charge associated with it that's easy to monitor. Nor can the city monitor how many people would have access to a timeshare. If it was a minimum of 2 weeks timeshare blocks, then you could have 26 parties moving in and out of these properties during the year. So while I understand Mr. Walters' point about trying to take a middle road on this thing, I think that given what's happening in the city of Sonoma in terms of the real estate market, the tendency of a capitalist-driven real estate market is to maximize the return on the investment. I was brought to my attention today, for example, that the condominiums on West Napa Street that have been refurbished, they're across from 4th Street. I'm sure you've all seen them. They're large, white, 2-story condominiums. Those all are currently offered on Zillow at $6,000 for a minimum of 30 days and up to 6 months, which means basically this is a 1-month vacation rental, a 31-day vacation rental, because anything under 30 days isn't allowed to be a vacation rental unless it gets a permit. So being offered right now publicly to be 31 days for $6,000 or $6,000 a month for up to 6 months. Now, this is an illustration of the financial pressure in terms of visitors serving businesses that's coming to bear and will continue to come to bear on the city of Sonoma unless we close the door to it. It's not an analogous situation. This isn't a timeshare, but this is essentially a rental condominium going for 1 day over 1 month for $6,000, which, if you compare it with the price of a hotel room for a month, is a pretty damn good deal. And yet these are the market forces we're coping with in Sonoma. And I think that we need to take a harder line, because these market forces will exploit, and call me a cynic, these market forces will exploit any gap in our development code that they can find. And they will drive a truck through it until it gets closed. And once it's granted and permitted, it's hard to close the door. So my opinion is, no, I wouldn't like to see any timeshares in the city of Sonoma at all. And let's see if someone makes a stink about it and deal with it then. For now, I'm in favor of just having be a blanket prohibition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. Anyone else? I'll raise a couple of questions, and I think I want to address a couple of questions to Mr. Walter. Do you have a sense between now and, is it March or April, where the city council will be possibly signing off on a permanent code or modification? Will there be any clarity from what's happening in St. Helena or other jurisdictions that are currently going through the litigation process that might enlighten us, that give us a little bit more, put it this way, I'm not opposed to the middle of the road should it be found that in 2 months, 3 months, it is in our best interest to take Vice Chair Barnett's recommendation and just totally disallow it. But I'm also open to an incremental approach, provided that we don't lose the opportunity to eliminate them entirely or ban them entirely.
I seriously doubt it. My understanding of the status of the St. Helena case is it's pretty much in the process of litigation. I think there's discovery, depositions have been scheduled and the like. So I don't know. I don't think it will be concluded in the next 2 to 3 months. And I'm not aware of other litigation pending right now that might shine greater light on the questions you just raised, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, yeah. Yes. Who?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Mr. Chair. While you're thinking of your other questions, while we have Jeff available, in response to Commissioner McDonald's question about impact fees and the like, currently we don't have any impact fees that relate to fractional ownership or timeshares. We have no studies to support the basis for a fee. The fees that we currently have for commercial relate to retail and office, and then we also have a hotel fee. So that was part of what was guiding my response to the TOT, is maybe we can come up with a study before the resolution perhaps of the St. Helena case to determine if we do go the commercial route, that we might be able to create an impact fee, assuming that there's a nexus to it. That'll take quite a bit of work in my view, but at the same time, it may be another way to add some money to the housing trust fund. That concludes my comment.
Thank you. My only one other comment before I will go back to round 2 with my fellow commissioners was,
Mr. Chair, are you going to open it to public comment before further comment?
I'm sorry, you're right. Let's forego any further commission discussion, and let's now open up the public portion of the hearing. Thank you.
Yes, Chair Wellender, Bill Willers would like to speak.
Very good. Welcome, Bill.
Bill, you'll need to unmute yourself.
There we go. Sorry about that. Good evening, members of the Commission, Chair Wellender. I'd like to have the Commission focus on the future.
I'm sorry, Mr. Willers. I clicked the wrong button, so you'll need to unmute yourself again. Apologize.
Okay. How about now?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening, Chair Wellender, members of the Commission. I think it's really important that the Commission consider the future, and that is, you will soon be considering the housing element. As part of considering the housing element, you will also have to consider the RENA numbers. As part of that, you'll have to consider where you're going to find the land to zone for residential use. We've had a lot of discussion in the community related to commercial properties that are underutilized as possibly providing an area in which could be rezoned to be used at a higher density residential, as a higher density residential zoning district. To open the door today under the guise of an emergency for timeshares to commercial speculation of commercial properties so that they can have a permitted use of timeshares is really, really ill-timed. I think that one, either this should be tabled until after the process of evaluating our development code and housing element, or at least that at the moment you should totally ban timeshares in the city of Sonoma. I just offer that for food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willers. Anyone else?
Yes, Lou Braun would like to speak.
Okay, please bring him forward.
Lou, you can speak.
Hi, Wendy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, commissioners, thank you for giving me a little time. I personally feel very much that Commissioner Barnett hit the nail on the head. Until, there are legal ramifications otherwise, what's the harm of basically saying, no, we're not going to allow these timeshare units in our town? That's just not something we're trying to do right now. We're trying to bring in more housing, not timeshares. I think the other thing to consider is that there's quite a number of people in Sonoma that are pretty opposed to Picasso and these other timeshare organizations. I think they would feel misrepresented if we sent out a signal that, well, we are going to allow timeshares, kinda. I don't think that will be clear to them that the intent is good and to avoid risk and potential litigation. I think it would be a sign that perhaps this commission feels like timeshares are okay, when in fact many people in our town don't think timeshares are okay. So thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Braun.
No other members of the public have their hands raised.
Okay then, seeing no more hands from the public, I will close the public portion and let us continue our rich discussion amongst commissioners. Mr. Barbos.
I just wanted to get clarification from Mr. Walter that this ordinance as proposed would not delete or diminish any required residential component in commercial or mixed-use zones in the absence of a waiver of that requirement.
Mr. Barbos, that certainly is not its intent. The intent of this is not to affect, to my knowledge, the residential component that is triggered in a mixed-use project.
Or a commercial project.
Or a commercial project.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to be clear about that.
Mr. Bohart.
Jeff Walter, please. What are the legal issues being raised in the St. Helena issues that we might benefit from knowing about?
I must confess, I don't know them.
Okay.
I'm not sure what they are.
None of that's public then.
I have an answer to that.
Oh, good.
Go ahead, Mr. Barnett.
My understanding is the primary legal case affecting St. Helena was the recommendation of the city of St. Helena and communication to real estate agents selling in the St. Helena market that they should not represent or get themselves involved with Picasso, and that the suit that Picasso has filed is in fact not to overturn the timeshare ordinance in St. Helena, but in fact is litigation seeking damages for what they consider to have been St. Helena's discriminatory actions against them in the free and open marketplace through inappropriate communication of policy to real estate agents in St. Helena. And I believe that is the primary basis of the sales of the lawsuit.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's my understanding too. I know that they got into trouble, planning staff actually got into trouble as being the author of that communication to the public.
Very good. Mr. Bohart, do you have a second question or a comment?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. McDonald.
Yes, let me do my video. Thank you again. I have concerns about, this is my one main concern about allowing this with a use permit in a commercial zone. It has to really do with one of the primary revenue sources of our city, which is hotel occupancy tax. And my concern has to do with taking hotel units off the market, which actually generate revenue for our city, and allowing the timeshare units without the understanding of how we're going to be able to substitute the loss of those revenues with these timeshare units. And that's a big concern of mine. And I can see hotel owners and potential hotel developers wanting to take parts of their development and have a timeshare. I've been in those. There's several large hotel chains that do that. I would imagine that they would like to have boutique hotels in Sonoma on a smaller scale that allow that and market those. So that's my main concern. I don't understand what the ramifications would be to our like our revenues for the city if we started losing hotel units that bring in revenue and subsidize the timeshare units. And then that leaves a question as to whether or not the hotel occupancy tax would be collected. So that's my main concern. And, I don't want the city to start losing money.
Mr. Barnett, do you still have some thoughts?
Yes,
Please.
just quickly, I want to second Mr. McDonald's concern. For example, I believe the lodge at Sonoma is a commercially zoned and commercial use. There's a building on the corner which was originally supposed to be retail and has since been converted to hotel rooms. And if we allow timeshares in commercial zones, and I'm not saying they're planning this, but as Mr. McDonald points out, it's now becoming more common with hotels. There's no reason why they couldn't take those units in that corner building that used to be offices and now are hotel rooms and convert them to timeshares and basically sell them through the hotel marketing program, so to speak, and or at least administer them through the hotel marketing program and recapture the revenue on the sale price of those timeshares. Keep in mind, whether it's a fractional unit of 12 or 24 or whatever the number is, the whole point of it is in the aggregate, you're recovering more than the purchase cost of the unit or the development cost of the unit. You're making a profit on the sale of a unit. So, this may be attractive to the hotels, as Mr. McDonald has indicated, and it explains why various hotel chains are in fact offering to create timeshares within the structure, because then when the timeshare isn't rented, they have access to it to sell it to the public as another room. So the whole thing is pretty screwy. And I just think that it needs much more study, and the safest thing to do now, I will repeat, I think, is to ban them and do much more research and determine how we go ahead in this in the future based on both on the response and the demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. Ms. O'Neill, you've been waiting patiently.
We are a second home market. We're a third, fourth, fifth home market. We are definitely ripe for these timeshare fractional ownerships. It's going to be across the board. Anything that we can do to be very aggressive in this regard and do it sooner. And because as Vice Chair Barnett said, people will find the loopholes and they'll drive a truck through them. So what I'm really concerned about is that we're being too soft here. And I think that being too soft is just going to cause us to lose all of our potential housing for primary residences. And I see that constantly. And I do think that these fractional ownerships are one problem. Timeshares, if they do evolve, I worry about them taking over single family homes, condos, etc. Not so much hotels. I don't think the hotels are going to give up their very valuable hotel rooms that make so much money for them. But I think we have to be extremely aggressive and look beyond what we're going to do with the fractional home ownership, banning it, or the timeshare, but also be more aggressively looking at how we potentially tax or put a penalty on second homes, third homes, fourth homes, whether they're vacant or occupied.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Mr. Barbos.
Well, after listening to my fellow commissioners, I'm come around to thinking we should have an outright ban on these fractional ownerships, including commercial and mixed use, until such time as we're told we can't do that. And if that day never comes, we're ahead of the game, because I think, I do think there's some potential for the hotels. You look behind the lodge, there's all of these, I don't know what they call them, they're suites. They're like little houses. And
Casitas.
What's that?
Casitas.
Exactly. they could start marketing those. And it'd be a great hedge against a downturn in the market, and they could get a lot of cash up front. So I hadn't even really thought of that, but I think has a real potential for eroding the TOTs, as Bob McDonald has already expressed concern about. So I too would be in favor of a blanket prohibition.
Thank you, Mr. Barbos. Mr. Wyrick.
I just wanted to echo the thoughts of, I think Commissioner O'Neill captured my sentiments wholly. Vice Chair Barnett as well. I think that I'd be in support of an outright ban from the get here in the form of an urgency ordinance, and maybe we come back and revisit it. But I think as a means of preventing, what we don't want here, I think we should take our chances with an outright ban and see where that gets us.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Bohar.
I think I'm swinging in the same direction as Commissioner Barbos after hearing all this. I'd also like to add that as far as Commissioner McDonald's comments, I had the same experience or the similar experience about a hotel being converted to timeshare. We were up in the Vale Village in the fall. The Village is the center of that resort, and it's active all year round. It's a very charming old part of town, a lot of historic buildings and so forth, not unlike Sonoma. And we stayed in a very charming medium-sized hotel, which had been converted to timeshare. And we were in fact staying in some owner's suite. So I can see that as a real reality here in Sonoma, given the nature of who we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bohart. Anyone else before I share my, Mr. Barnett.
Just one last comment. Back in 1999, I led the effort on the then Sonoma City Council to ban vacation rentals in residential zones in the city of Sonoma. At the time, and it did get the support of the city council and it became an ordinance. At the time, the idea of Airbnb or the proliferation of vacation rentals was in the distant future. I didn't think it was in the distant future, and I was trying to be preemptive and bold about city policy. You can imagine what it would be like in the city of Sonoma if we hadn't done that. You can see what's been going on in the rest of the county and how the county has had to play catch up on trying to get a handle on vacation rentals because they were not bold enough. And we were bold enough in 1999 to take a very unusual step of banning vacation rentals in residential zones. And this is an analogous situation. I feel we've got to be just as bold about these timeshares in the city overall, because we have to be preemptive. We can't wait to respond to these things after they've happened. We have to be preemptive about it and be challenged. And I'm glad to see that the rest of you seem to be coming to the same conclusion. And I hope the city council sees the wisdom in it. It's certainly, we learned a lesson with our ban on vacation rentals in the residential zones, and it has protected Sonoma from becoming the city of Carmel. And that was the reason I proposed it then. And what is it now? That's like 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And just imagine what this town would be like if we hadn't done it. It's the same situation right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. Mr. Storr, do you want to speak before you hear from your chair?
I'd like to give you something to think about, Mr. Chair, as you conclude. I think Mr. Walter and I have heard consensus, barring your comments, yourself, and then also, so that'll be number one, a message to communicate or provide to the City Council on the 19th that is the collective vision, if you will, of the Commission to ban them outright throughout the city, and also to include, secondly, expand the definition of timeshare to include the words fractional ownership. That concludes my comments, and look forward to your direction, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I've appreciated greatly this conversation over the last 20, 30 minutes. And when we began, there were questions came up in my mind as far as, whether we could get some TOT or whether we can get some impact fee, whatever. Where I was leaning was whatever we do, there needs to be a benefit to the city. And what I mean by that is there needs to be some sort of financial benefit other than those that take advantage of the vacation rental or the fractional. They come and they spend money at the restaurants and stores. I am wholeheartedly going to support what now is the consensus that we ban vacation rentals totally and roll the dice and hope that the repercussions will be such that we're willing to fight for. So I support my fellow commissioners with a total ban. I question for Mr. Storr, this is a study. You need not hear a motion. Or do you want a motion, or is it simply a case where you've heard us express our sentiment?
I think we're okay, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Walter, you good with that?
Yes.
Okay. If anyone else has parting comments, great, speak up. If not, let's put a wrap to this one and open up item 9.1.
Point of order, can we have a 5-minute recess?
Absolutely, Mr. Barnett. We'll take a 5-minute recess starting now.
I just raised my hand though. I just on a parting comment. I just want to make sure that when we do send something to the council with the resolution, that we have very tight findings of why we want to ban it. And so I look forward to seeing those. I heard some of the concerns of our fellow commissioners, such as loss of hotel sales tax, potentially a number of other impacts. So I'd like to just make sure that those are all folded into the resolution, so it's very clear to the city council what our intent was.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you.
Now we're down to 4.5 minutes.
Ha! That's not fair. Okay.
Are we getting close to being back? Okay, looks like everyone's here but Mr. Storr, possibly. Thank you, Sheila. Mr. McDonald, are we within earshot?
I'm here.
Thank you, thank you. Before we jump into 9.1, I just wanted to give clarity to both David and to Jeff. I believe what I heard from Mr. McDonald is to make sure that we have some sort of context is given as you refine this urgent ordinance, in that I don't see it that you're actually putting our language into it, but I would appreciate if there's somehow there could be a preamble or some sort of written context as far as some of the reasons behind our comments.
I think staff will do its darndest to make sure the rationale supporting the recommendations is included in the staff report. As I understand it, this measure will be going before the council at its meeting next Wednesday. And if that's the case, it will not be possible to craft a resolution with findings, bring it back to the commission for its approval, and then submit it to the council. So you're going to have to rely on and trust staff to articulate the commission's views and the rationale that supports them in a staff report.
Understood. And with some degree of trepidation, we do support staff's ability to do that. Mr. Storr.
Yeah, the downside is the staff report's already been written and uploaded to the AIS system. And in that staff report, I did say that I would be communicating to the council your direction, and I'll certainly include that along with Mr. Walter as we make that presentation to council about your concerns.
Very good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Barnett.
A question for staff and for the city attorney. I'm assuming there's no prohibition for a member of the Planning Commission to speak before the council in public comment when this matter comes before the council. Am I correct?
It's a very interesting question. I don't believe there's a legal prohibition. I know that some council members and some mayors in some of my cities have frowned upon that, particularly in a setting where there's an appeal from the Planning Commission to the council. That's not the situation here, but I've actually seen mayors get very exercised about commissioners who were on the losing end of a decision at the Planning Commission and then appear at the hearing before the council on appeal to plead their case for reversal.
I understand on a policy measure like this, though, I think I'm hoping that it would be a different case.
I would think, but I don't know.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Then in continuing, we're going to be discussing agenda item 9.1, which is again a study session to discuss and review adopted urgency ordinance for the objective design standards, objective subdivision standards for residential development implemented subject to SB 9. And with that long sentence, I'll look to staff for a report.
Thank you. Can everybody see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
It only took 2 years, but I finally mastered the Zoom screen share. All right. Well, this is not the first time we've been discussing SB 9 at the Planning Commission. We're just picking up where we left off. But for a quick overview, SB 9 is the California Home Act, which requires the ministerial approval of a 2-unit housing development on an existing parcel, as well as a ministerial approval of an urban lot split. The approvals have to be based on objective standards, and denials are only allowed if the project doesn't meet objective standards or there are specific adverse impacts to health and safety. So on December 5th, of 2021, the Sonoma City Council adopted an urgency ordinance to have city-specific objective standards for SB 9 projects ahead of the implementation date of SB 9, which was January 1st, 2022. We had a very lengthy process where we had various study sessions at the Planning Commission level and joint meetings, as well as review of the draft urgency ordinance on December 2nd. The urgency ordinance that was adopted by City Council was nearly identical to the urgency ordinance that the Planning Commission reviewed, with some minor tweaks for some additional language and clarification. The urgency ordinance went into effect on December 15th, 2021, and similar to the previous discussion, it remains in effect until a regular or permanent ordinance removes it. City Council provided direction to staff to discuss the adopted urgency ordinance at the Planning Commission this evening, and as well to move forward with the regular ordinance. So tonight we are here to go over briefly the urgency ordinance that was adopted and was included in your packet, and to solicit feedback from the Planning Commission as staff drafts a regular ordinance. The urgency ordinance, just to remind everyone, we added 2 new sections to the Sonoma Municipal Code. Section 1941, which is titled Related to Ministerial Residential Projects in Residential Zoning Districts. This section established standards for new development on an existing lot without a lot split. And Section 1972 relates to ministerial parcel maps for urban lot splits. So this is this section that outlines standards where the lot would be split into different ownership. These projects would apply in city zoning district that allow single family residential. And our ordinance specifically calls out that it's allowed in hillside residential, rural residential, low density residential, and the residential Sonoma zoning districts. Some of the highlights of the ordinance are that the minimum and maximum for the units is 800 square feet, 1 story and 18-foot maximum, unless you can't meet the provisions, in which case a 2-story would be allowed. No flag lots are allowed, and must meet all of our existing objective standards, as well as a requirement to deed restrict the units for affordable housing pursuant to our affordable housing ordinance, or similar to our affordable housing ordinance. And in order to just address some of the concerns from members of the public that have come up recently in some of the comments, I just wanted to remind everyone that we have our own definitions for the various affordability levels that was adopted in 2021. So the City of Sonoma has definitions which parallel the HUD levels as well, for extremely low, low, middle, and moderate. And so just to make sure we're all speaking about the same terminology, the so-called missing middle that this is trying to address, we are looking at the moderate in our new middle income category. This is basically 120 to 160 AMI. And for Sonoma County, what that means is for a 1-person household, the lowest, the median income is 72,000. For a family of 8, for moderate, it goes up to 163,000. So all this data is what we've been using to craft our ordinances. And this is just sharing for your information. This is the Sonoma County Affordable Purchase Price Summary from the county website. So for a studio apartment, what is affordable to 100% of the median income for a studio is $318,000. And then the high for 120 for a 6-bedroom is $677.21. Just to help facilitate the discussion, I went backwards from the December home sales in the City of Sonoma from Zillow, and included all of the sales and broke it up by price per square foot. So the average price per square foot for the sales between December 9th and November 18th was $634. We had a low of $311 and a high of $1.28 million. And just taking that and applying it to our urgency ordinance, our approved urgency ordinance, if we, using our average 500 square foot home, would cost on average $317,000. That would be affordable to an 80% AMI for median income for a studio. At 800 square feet, the average price would be $507,000. Would be affordable at 100% median for a 3-bedroom or 110% median for a 2-bedroom. When we get to like over 1,000 square feet, none of the income categories would qualify for those units. So this evening, we are soliciting comments and direction on the regular ordinance. After the comments this evening, staff will take that direction and draft the regular ordinance and bring that back to the Planning Commission on February 10th. And we're tentatively scheduled for City Council to hear and introduce the regular ordinance on March 2nd, with a second reading on March 16th. And the ordinance would go into effect 30 days after that. Are there any questions?
Yes, could you, off the top of your head, just say what any of those changes were that went from the Planning Commission to what you presented to City Council?
There were some clarifications about plate height that had been recommended by Bill Willers that we added in. David and Jeff, do you remember offhand what the other changes were? They were pretty minor.
The other one I remember is that the council changed the minimum maximum 800 square feet to no greater than 800 feet. So it could be less than 800 square feet. It doesn't have to be. It could be less, up to 800 square feet in size.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? I'll take my screen back if I could.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. So if we have no other questions for staff, I'd like to go ahead at this time, open it up to the public. And once again, I look to our conductor, Wendy.
Thank you, Chair Wellender. There are no hands that are being raised at this time. Thank you.
Wow, quick, let's close it. So I bring it back to my fellow commissioners to have a discussion. Mr. Barbos.
Well, as I understand it, we're commenting on what, if any, changes we think should be made when we adopt a permanent ordinance implementing SB 9. Is that what we're doing?
Correct.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Well, I thought I made this point before, but I have my copy of SB 9 right here, highlighted and so forth. And it says a housing development contains 2 residential units if the development proposes no more than 2 new units, or if it proposes to add 1 new unit to 1 existing unit. And clearly to me, the legislature did not intend to downsize existing houses to 800 square feet in order to add a duplex unit under the provisions of SB 9. But if I look at our ordinance, there's no way in there that you could actually do that. It maximizes the size of both units on a 2-unit development at 800 square feet. That's not consistent with what SB 9 says. So I think we need to revisit the scenario where there's a house on a lot and somebody wants to put a duplex on it. They don't have to tear down their house or downsize their house. They just have to put a limitation on the duplex up to 800 square feet. And it has to meet all the other requirements in our ordinance. But we don't take that scenario into account whatsoever. So that's my one primary objection to what we've done thus far. We're not allowing for that. And the other thing is that I've mentioned this before, I think, well, related to the 800 square feet, even if it's 2 units of new construction, we're limiting it to 800 square feet. And I don't know if all of you saw it, but Bill Willers did a very comprehensive analysis of relationship between FAR and the 800 square feet. And so he showed that at certain small lot sizes, the 800 is actually greater than FAR, what we could build. But as the lot size goes up, you could meet the FAR and exceed 800 square feet. So I think that we need to tweak our ordinance to allow larger than 800 square feet in situations where it's not in excess of the existing FAR for that zoning, so that you could end up with a bigger than 800 square foot as long as you don't violate the FAR. But if you do, you're stuck with 800. And those are my 2 major points. I also have an issue with the affordability, not because I don't like affordable housing, but I think that requiring these to be affordable is going to actually be a disincentive for people to actually build them, because construction costs being what they are, there's no financial aid or assistance for people building affordable units on their own land. There's no public money available. And I think what's going to happen at $400 a square foot, which is what I hear the people are paying to build new construction here, you're just not going to get it. If you spend $320,000 to build an 800 square foot rental unit, you are not going to be able to afford to rent that out and make your payments if it's affordable. So I think that we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot. If the goal here is to create more housing, which clearly it is, then I think we're working at cross purposes when we do that. So those are my actually 3 points.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a comment with respect to Mr. Barbossa's comments. Everything that Steve said is true about Mr. Willers. I believe Mr. Willers also placed a 1,600 square foot maximum on that, up to, in other words, recognizing the FAR. I don't know if he necessarily advocated for that sliding scale FAR, but he said, should the commission wish to do that, then you could actually cap it at 1,600, whichever is the greatest through FAR or 1,600 square feet. And Commissioner Barbosa, you might want to address if that's what your thinking was as well.
Well, I just read that. I don't think that's what he's saying. He's saying that if FAR allows bigger than 2 800 square foot units, then you can go up to what FAR allows.
But did he not also say 1,600 square feet max?
No, that's not the maximum. That's the minimum.
Yes, that's correct.
1,600 is the minimum. The maximum is whatever FAR allows.
1 minute, Larry. Are we good, or you want more comment? Yes. David?
I'm good.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm going to reread, Mr. Chair, I'm going to reread Mr. Willers. I must have missed that.
Okay. Mr. Barnett.
Well, I'll just read the language that Mr. Willers has proposed. The total combined square footage of dwelling units built on each SB9 created parcel shall conform to the floor area ratio, the FAR, of the base zoning, or 1,600 square feet, whichever is greater. So if the FAR allows larger than 1,600 square feet, that's fine. So I completely support this idea. I think some of the comments that I've heard regarding the current urgency ordinance from the community is that it didn't seem to be equitable in terms of the entitlements that single-family homeowners or people who want to build a single-family home get on their parcels. I think this is a way of providing that equity so that we're not placing an undue limitation on the size of these SB9 units when, in fact, the parcel that results from the lot split is so large that they could have gone ahead, applied for a lot split and built a larger single unit on that parcel if they wanted to. So I agree that it's a good change, and I very much appreciate the work that Mr. Willers did to do that analysis. As insofar as the affordable component is concerned, it may be that Mr. Barbos's concerns are well-founded. On the other hand, it may be that his concerns are inappropriate and won't turn out to be correct. My feeling is that we're dealing with an ordinance that is statewide and new. We don't know how it's going to affect anything anywhere yet. And I would go to a view that the whole purpose of SB 9 was to increase the availability, i.e. affordability of housing. They didn't put any provisions in the bill to do it. They didn't provide any money to do it. But that doesn't mean that we as a jurisdiction can't impose some kind of affordability requirement. Now, when we do that, it may have the effect Mr. Barbos is suggesting, or it may not. And I think the option that we have is to put the affordability requirements in place now and evaluate the effect on this community a year or 2 years down the line and see whether things are being built or not. If it turns out that the imposition of affordability requirements has suppressed any SB 9 subdivisions at all, then the city can choose to modify that requirement. It may say, okay, one of the 2 duplex units has to be affordable. In other words, we're not doing something that's cast in concrete for the future of all humanity here. We can decide, as we discussed with the timeshare ordinance, we can take a position and evaluate what happens and what the response of the market is to those decisions down the line and make an adjustment if we have to. So those 2 elements are, to me, the prime area of the possibility of changes in this ordinance. And I think that we ought to stick with the affordability, and I think we ought to put in the flexibility of the language Mr. Willers suggested so that the size of the units are not constrained to 800 square feet once they get into a subdivision or a lot size that would allow, under our normal development code, larger units. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Mr. Chair. In listening and also reading language, it seems clear, and I stand to be corrected. It looks like the 2 800s are the basis for the 1600, and that would be 800 apiece. And he's saying sliding scale up based on FAR. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bohar. You're muted, Jim. You're muted.
Here we go.
There you go.
I agree with Commissioner Barnett's comments, and I appreciate Bill Willer's work on this. I think that it's also obviously suitable to a lot where there's an existing building and the owner wants to add the additional unit. So I think that's an excellent idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone? Mr. Barbos, yes.
Just one quick addition to the comments. I don't think Bill Willer's language as written exactly works because it assumes that you only have a 1,600 square foot maximum, which doesn't take into account the scenario where you have an existing house and you're going to keep that existing house without having to chop part of it off and build a duplex unit, provided that you can still get within the FAR. So I think that we need to, I encourage all of you to go back and read SB 9. It clearly contemplates adding just 1 unit to an existing unit, and it says nothing about downsizing it. and it says nothing about limiting the size of the existing unit. So I think it's the 800 square feet, and the FAR limitation is with respect to anything new that's being constructed. Shouldn't affect what's already there. That's my point.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if that was the intent, I mean, it was certainly not Christina and I when we worked with the city attorney's office. It's clearly to recognize the existing nature of a structure. It was limited to the new development. So that was not our intent, was to make somebody chop a unit down to make its size to be 800 square feet. So we'll re-review that.
Very good.
Steve, I think that you're disregarding a portion of what Mr. Willer's statement says. He says the square footage of dwelling units built on each SB9 created parcel. So an SB9 created parcel is a parcel that's split and created from the original parcel. It doesn't address the size. In other words, his language doesn't specifically address the size of an existing residential unit that wants to add an 800 or add an additional unit to turn it into a duplex. And so I think what we may need is some language in this that specifically addresses not the lot splits, but the addition of a second unit to an existing parcel and an existing house. That may need some additional language.
I agree. I think looking at Bill's, I have took a picture of it so I could yeah, that makes sense. But then we would still have to look to the FAR to determine if we could exceed the 800 square feet on the unit we're adding to an existing.
Right.
Correct.
Right. Yes, that would be part of the calculation.
Anyone else?
Is Sheila not participating in this?
Oh.
You're muted, Sheila.
I'm here. I'm in agreement with all of the comments and the additional work that was done by Bill Willers. Sorry, I'm keeping my video off because doing this from home is hard with animals. I just have too many cats and dogs bugging me.
Understood.
There was a dog barking earlier. Was that
you don't have
That's not my dog.
At least you don't have a horse in the house.
Yeah.
No, they're outside.
Very good. Well, thank you. Okay. I want to pose just a question for hopefully additional discussion. In light of what is written and the modifications we're proposing, what is our gut feeling? Are we generating incentive to possibly create more affordable units, or are we structuring it such that, yes, we may be building more housing units, but they will not fall under an affordable level?
Mr. Chair, if I can, Christina, can you remind me? We did provide that these units, the resultant new units, are to be deed restricted in perpetuity. Am I correct? And that we also suggested that they will be moderate. Is that what we did?
We did. There is a provision that they be deed restricted. I believe what we did was mirror our ordinance where the rental units would be low and an ownership unit would be moderate. I'm looking that up now.
Thank you.
Is that under 1972?
I'm looking, I think it's in both of them. Here I'm under 12 on 1941. The owner of each newly created unit in a 2-unit residential project shall enter into an affordable housing agreement in a form approved by the housing director, planning director, and city attorney. So low income for rentals, ownership are moderate.
I just didn't see the language under 1941-090 called deed restriction, so that's why I'm questioning.
It's 1941. $150, number 12.
Thank you. Okay. So then if we keep the affordability requirement in there, at least in concept, we should be adding to the affordable housing stock. So my other question is kind of parallel with what Steve brought up earlier. Has this been structured to the point that because of the affordable restrictions, would that discourage a potential developer, potential homeowner to do anything? Have we created it so tight? Because if SB9 is intended to create more housing units, and we know we have a very strong contingent of folks wanting affordability, are we going to be able to achieve it? Or are we headed in a direction where we may gain?
Yeah, that was definitely something we talked about at the ad hoc, that it might be a good topic for discussion at the Planning Commission to discuss the affordability levels. If we want low and moderate, do we want just moderate, do we want middle? In the housing data that I pulled from Zillow, the the home prices, so 1,600 square foot house on Joaquin sold for $1 million. 1,100 on Banchero is $1.3 million. 1,400 square feet on 7th Street, 730. 800 square feet, 7th Street West, 470. So they're Patton, 994 square feet, $1.3 million. I think there are smaller units that are nowhere near what would be affordable to middle income family.
Yeah,
Mr. Barnett.
Well, thank you. I think what Christine is illustrating here, just in the few examples she just gave, is that home prices also are dependent upon location. A house on Patton Street is going to sell for more money generally than a house on the west side, for example, like Joaquin. So the marketplace responds to location and ambiance and so forth. There's no way of coming up with an absolute figure as to what things will or will not sell for. I think that my concern is that that we don't know what the effect of this is going to be. We don't know what the effect of SB9 overall is going to be. So what, to me, is the cautious approach that ensures the greatest likelihood of affordability. My guess is that it's imposing some kind of affordability standard. Now, we could say that only one of the two units in a created 800 square foot each duplex is to be affordable rather than both. That would give them the opportunity to upgrade the other one to a higher, more expensive type amenities, which could then rent or sell for more. So that's one modification the council could consider rather than making it for every unit. The second thing is that we just take a look at how the market responds to this and respond to it in a year or two based upon what history shows the relationship to it and affordability has become. I think my concern is that, and the reason I support the affordability standard is because I'm worried that these are going to turn into really reasonably priced pied-à-terres for San Francisco and Silicon Valley folks who want to have a nice little second home in the wine country, and for whom the price is no objection, and without an affordability covenant, picking up an 800 square foot unit for $500,000-$600,000 on a nice part of the east side of Sonoma, great. It's going to be very attractive. And if we see what's going on, and I'll go back to that example of the condos on West Napa Street, if you design something for a specific market segment and you develop a strategy to appeal to them and you market to it. By the way, I was amused today to discover that Picasso is running ads on KSVY. I thought that was a pretty interesting little tidbit. in any event, if you position things and you market to it, you'll get your price and you'll get your buyers. And these things are going to end up on Zillow, marketed to anyone in the Bay Area in California who would just love to have a little place in Sonoma. What a great opportunity. And these are going to generally be little places, and they're going to be, you know, a great little weekend getaway. And I don't think it's going to be, without an affordability covenant, it's not going to be something that the locals are going to be able to get into.
One of the benefits of the affordability restrictions is that it has to be owned, occupied by somebody who meets those limits. So they would have to meet, you know, moderate income, just because it's, you know, exactly what Vice Chair Barnett is saying. You know, if it's on the free market, the pool for applicants is going to be much larger, and that will drive up the price.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's really important to remember that in the world of ADUs and SB 9, that the legislature's intent was to have these smaller units approved almost by right, if you will, in both scenarios. The theory being that the smaller they are, the more affordable they are in the open market. That's with a small letter A. The state of California does not have capital A affordable requirements at all, and local jurisdictions are free to adopt them on their own. 30% of the jurisdictions in California perhaps have inclusionary housing ordinances, and we are certainly one of those, and one of those with the highest percentage requirement at 25%. So I think it's really important that, is it affordable by design through size? Probably. That, as Mr. Barnett has pointed out, without the restrictions on that, then you are allowing the free market to determine what the small a is going to equal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Question for Mr. Walter, for Mr. Storr. Have you heard enough comments that you can move forward with confidence?
Yes, I believe we have. Thank you. What we will do is we'll prepare a regular ordinance based on your comments tonight and go to that point in February.
Very good. All right. We're now going to go back to the 8 series, and I do believe 8.2 is up. However, it appears this is something we can discuss briefly. It is an item regarding an ADU, but the applicant has requested a continuance. So do we need to have a motion for this to be continued?
Yes,
No.
please.
Is that a yes and a no? I'm getting confused.
I said yes, please, and Vice Chair said no.
Well, let's see who writes my paycheck. Let me think. It's a fairly simple thing. Could I have a motion to continue 8.2?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Commissioner Barbos,
Yes.
Commissioner Bohar,
Aye.
Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Wyrick,
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett,
Yes.
and Chair Wellender.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
Very good. So moving then on to 8.3. This is discussion consideration for use permit for a natural gas emergency generator at Sonoma Valley Community Health Center. And with that, I would like to have staff's report.
Thank you, Chair Wellinger and Planning Commissioners. Oh, my computer doesn't want to do a presentation, so that's okay. Oh, boy. This item is a resolution authorizing the use permit application to install a 60 kilowatt natural gas emergency generator at a medical office, Sonoma Valley Community Health Center at 19270. All right. I'm going to have to stop my share for a moment. Excuse me. My VPN site was having a little bit of an issue, so I'm going to log in again. All right. Back in 2013, the Planning Commission approved a use permit application of Sonoma Valley Community Health Center to occupy the building as a medical clinic and office in conjunction with an exception to the parking standard. The property is a 1.36 acre parcel located on the east side of Sonoma Highway, opposite Ramon Street. The property is currently developed with a 16,800 square foot commercial building, and the frontage of the property is developed with curb, gutter, and sidewalk. Surrounding uses include commercial to the north, south, east, and west. The applicant is requesting a use permit amendment to support the addition of a new 60 kilowatt emergency natural gas generator on site that would allow the facility to continue operations during planned power outages and emergency power failures. The generator is proposed to be installed on an existing concrete pad located 1.5 feet from the 12-foot tall exterior masonry wall along the northern side of the property line. So here's a site plan, and down at the bottom is where Sonoma Highway is. This shaded lined area is the medical facility building. Here's the proposed location of the generator, and here are some adjoining storage units to the property to the north. And this is what the generator would look like. The proposal is consistent with both the general plan and the development code. With regard to the noise ordinance, the project zone is zoned commercial for commercial development, and noise is limited in that on commercial property, noise limits, no person shall produce, suffer, or allow to be produced any machine, animal, or device, or a noise level greater than 65 dBA intermittent and 55 dBA constant, unless specifically authorized by a use permit. And then I would note on 2020, the City Council approved amendment to the noise ordinance that would address the need for emergency generators, which allows backup generators to exceed the noise ordinance no more than 5 dBA during a power outage. So the proposed generator is not consistent with the noise ordinance. The maximum constant dBA for a commercial property is 60, and the noise analysis determined that the noise produced would have a dBA of 61, which is 1 dBA over the allowable level. And so staff included a condition of approval that the generator comply with the noise restrictions. After installation of the generator, the applicant will submit a noise report demonstrating compliance with the Sonoma Municipal Code. And if the noise generated is above 60, then they'll need to do some type of enclosure to reduce the noise coming from the generator. And there are certain findings that this commission will need to make in order to approve the use permit amendment. And staff recommending the Planning Commission approve a resolution authorizing a use permit for a generator subject to findings and conditions of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Do my fellow commissioners have any questions for staff? Is the applicant present and wish to speak to this item?
Yes, he is, and I've just allowed Will Finney to speak, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I have Ray Reyff, who is the owner of Reyff Electric and plans to do the install on the project here, and he'd like to speak on the project.
Nice to meet you all. The health center, one of the big reasons of the generator install for the health center is actually for the vaccination and refrigeration. Emergency use only with power outages. They actually experienced a loss in 2020. They have a state grant. It's been approved for the installation of the generator. The generator, they really need that backup generator. One being for the vaccinations, and two, when there is power outages, they need to keep that health center open.
Okay. Very good. Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and possible action. Yes, Mr. Bohar.
I saw the letter from the neighbor who is a self-storage or mini storage operation, and he agreed with the applicant's request here, and I think that's pretty strong. For one, he's a neighbor, but for two, he's a mini storage operation, which is not I don't think, a very sensitive receptor for noise. You know, the noise delta from normal seems very minimal, so I would agree with the staff suggestion that the amendment be added to it where they're going to report on it and fix it with a noise suppression enclosure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Do we have to open up for public comment first, or?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, we do have to open up for public comment. So with that, I'd like to open it up for public comment.
Chair Wellender, there's no members of the public that want to speak. Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel bad. Anyway.
Well, can I make a motion that we approve this?
Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? I do have one question for staff before we take a vote, and that is, this is the third, fourth, fifth generator that has come before the commission. And I do believe there have been several that have requested post-installation noise evaluations to confirm whether or not it's in compliance. To the best of your knowledge, have we done these, and have the reports been accurate in the sense that what was presented proved to be what was actually generated? And I'll be happy to hear from any one of the three staff on this.
So I'm probably the one who should answer that. So the projects that I have worked on include MacArthur Place, 91 Napa Road, Friedman Brothers, and the Ledson Hotel. We did have some issues with MacArthur Place that the estimated noise level was a little bit lower than what it was in the field. They were able to rectify it with some noise paneling on the inside of the enclosure. They had already gone through design review and proposed enclosures for the generator, so that made it easier. We're dealing with an issue on 91 Napa Road where the noise report identified pretty substantial difference between what the estimate was and what was in the field. And so we've been working with that applicant on some solutions. So it's definitely not, it seems like it should be pretty straightforward, but there are some discrepancies.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that comment, I'd like to go ahead and ask for roll call.
Thank you. Commissioner Barbos.
Yes.
Commissioner Bohar.
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill. I think you said yes, but you were muted. So she's giving me a thumbs up. Commissioner Wyrick.
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett,
Aye.
Chair Wellender.
Yes,
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously.
very good. Thank you very much. Okay, moving then right along to agenda item 8.4. This is discussion and consideration possible action for a use permit for a change of use from an office to a martial arts school at 1247 Broadway. And at this point, Wendy would welcome a report.
Thank you, Chair Wellender. The project is on an approximate 1.17 acre lot located on the west side of Broadway, south of Marcy Court. The property is currently developed with a 5,653 square foot commercial building and 44 on-site parking spaces. Surrounding land uses, that should say land uses, and this is a modification to the staff report. Thank you, Chair Wellender. To the north are apartments, and to the south is the Ultramadrone apartment complex. East is commercial and west is Sonoma residential. The applicant proposes a change in the use from a commercial office building into a martial arts studio, the Sonoma School of Martial Arts. Operation of the project will entail approximately 2 full-time staff members, and hours of operation are from 3 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and no more than 25 students and parents will be on site at any one time. No exterior modifications are proposed. The existing 44 space parking lot will not change. The martial arts school is the only tenant that will be using the building. This is a really unclear site plan, but it's supposed to show the building here and then the parking area to the back. The property is consistent with the general plan. However, the general plan has a residential component, and it's normally required in new development unless waived by this commission. The project does not provide a residential comment. However, in the definition of the mixed-use zone, the replacement of one commercial use with another in an existing tenant space represents a situation in which the requirement for a residential component may be made, and the applicant is requesting the residential component to be waived. The property zone mixed use, schools are allowed in the mixed use designation, and the parking requirement is 2 spaces for each classroom. So a total of 2 parking spaces are required for the art school or the martial arts school, and 44 are provided. There are certain findings this commission must make in order to approve the application, and staff is recommending that commission approve the resolution authorizing a use permit subject to findings and conditions of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions from commissioners to staff on the report? Mr. Barnett.
Thank you, Chair Wellender. This property, I'm pretty sure I'm thinking of the correct one, has been on the market for sale for a while, probably 10 months or a year. It's just south of the new affordable housing, it's just north of the new affordable housing project that's just been built. Can you remind me of the size of this parcel? Was this over an acre? Wendy?
Yes, it was 1.3.
Yeah. Do we know whether this is a lease situation or has the property been sold?
It's a lease.
It's a lease, and do we know how long the lease is for?
No, the applicant may be able to provide that information, and the site is approximately 1.7 acres.
Okay, I guess I'm just going to say that, you know, when I saw this parcel come up on the market, I was pleased because it's very large. It backs up on the St. Francis Reserve, and is a very significant property, which I had hoped was going to be included, and perhaps David Storer, you can tell me whether or not it was anticipated that this was being included in our inventory of parcels that could be demonstrated to meet our RENA numbers. We don't have that many 1.7 acre parcels in this town anymore. And as such, it's one of the larger parcels. And honestly, while I don't think it has a bearing on our approval tonight of this application, it was sincerely my hope that that this project would end up being developed as either a true mixed-use project and have housing on it, or perhaps just be entirely a housing project, because if it's
that's my
on a
understanding. Yeah.
and so I will express some disappointment that it didn't sell. I'm glad to hear it's a lease, and I'm assuming I doubt it's much more than a 5-year lease, but we'll find out from the applicant. I'm assuming, David, we can continue to include this on our inventory of parcels that are appropriate for housing development?
Yeah, part of the, and Wendy can address this too, but if she thinks of something that I don't say, but clearly when we look at the development of the RENA, we are able to look, and we have to explain to HCD why non-vacant lands have been identified to produce some of the RENA. And that's also underutilized properties as well. So this being on the market would give us the opportunity to analyze it. Wendy, can you add anything to that?
Nope, you did a good job.
Okay, any other commissioner questions to staff? Seeing none, then I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward and speak on this project.
Yes, so I've allowed Robert Morey to speak. You should be able to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. First of all, thank you for your time. I've never been at a planning commission meeting, and this has all been actually very interesting and eye-opening. Just to clarify for Commissioner Barnett, we have a 2-year lease, and the property is 1.17 acres. The owner did take down the sign earlier this week. He bought it a few years ago, and he still has the intention to develop it, but he knows that it's going to be several years before he can get all the permits and get everything organized. And so we're here on a limited time. You know, hopefully we can get 4 or 5 years, but at this point we just have a 2-year lease.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, do any commissioners have questions for the applicant?
I do.
Ms. O'Neill.
Robert, where are you operating your classes now?
Well, we are actually at 1247 with the temporary permit. We were at Yoga Community, which was great, but we moved in here last week.
Okay, and so you're operating under a temporary permit now. What's the feedback? How are things working out right now?
Well, the reason we left Yoga Community, even though we love the people there, is that the response has been overwhelming. Mr. Hoffman had Sonoma Taekwondo for some 30 years, and he shut it down almost 2 years ago. And parents were desperate to find, similar traditional quality martial arts, and which is why we moved here. So we have lots of parents who are very excited, and we haven't really even tried advertising or contacting the high school or the middle school across the street. But we know that there is a huge gap, or there was a gap for this sort of training and program in Sonoma. And so I think it's been going extraordinarily well.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I do.
Please.
Robert, just a quick question for you. How many people, what's your attendance like on a normal basis?
Well, so one of the things that we liked about this was that we could have concurrent classes, but what was more important was to reduce the number of students per class. So the biggest room, which is about 1,000 square feet, has a maximum of 20 students. And that's the way we're going to keep it. We're just offering more classes with smaller sizes.
Okay. So are your classes always full?
The Tuesday, Thursday one is the only one that's full. That's at the 4:30 class for beginners, 7 to 12-year-old beginners is the only one that's at 20. The other ones all have additional capacity available.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no,
Commissioner Wellender, would you like me to open it up to other members of the public?
I just wrote myself a note that said open to public. So let me read the note. Would we please open it up to the public?
Thank you, Chair Wellender. There are no members of the public that have raised their hand.
Okay, with that, I'll close the public portion and bring it back to my fellow commissioners for discussion and possible action.
I have a question for staff, Wendy.
Okay.
I heard in your report that this is considered a school, and the parking for schools was something like 2 parking spaces per classroom. That just seems like such an odd fit. And is that the only category we have available to us?
Well, I was thinking that, typical classroom has children in it, and maybe not all the kids have cars yet. But that was the closest parking that I could find. I can look.
Like, what is the use permit for? I don't even know if it's still there. The dance school that was on Broadway, kind of up by Pete's. Is that considered a school?
Oh boy.
I was just curious. I mean, obviously they have more than enough parking in this case. It just seemed like a really odd description and an odd parking requirement for a classroom, for an activity like this where the parents are going to be coming and going and dropping the kids off. So clearly we need more than 2 parking spaces. Luckily they have 44, so that's totally fine. It's no fault of this project. It just seemed weird.
Yeah, so a private school is 2 spaces per classroom. A high school is 2 spaces for each classroom plus 1 space for every 7 students. A studio for dance and art is 1 space for each 200 square feet of gross floor area.
When it comes to the municipal codes throughout the state and even the country, when there's a land use that's being proposed where it's not articulated in the code, the director gets to make a call. You try to figure out something that's close or approximate to, and as you pointed out, Commissioner O'Neill, there's plenty of on-site, so it really became a moot point.
Any other comments? Could we entertain a motion?
I make a motion that we approve this proposal. I approved that we approve the resolution authorizing a use permit subject to findings and conditions of approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Barbos,
Yes.
Commissioner Bohar,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Wyrick,
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett,
Aye.
and Chair Wellender.
Yes.
Oh,
I
you
think
forgot.
I forgot Commissioner McDonald. I apologize.
That's okay.
Is that an aye vote?
Yes, yes, for me.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, now, again, keeping our momentum going, agenda item number 8.5. Similar to 8.3, we're dealing with a discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding the installation of a gas-powered microturbines to generate electricity at 1250 Broadway, known as the Broadway Villa Post-Acute Complex. And with that, Ms. Tierney, we'd like to report.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you pretty much summarized my whole staff report at 1250 Broadway, the Broadway Villas Post-Acute. This is just north of the Sonoma Valley High School. The project site is a little over 2 acres. It's accessed off Woodworth Lane behind Jacob's Pizza, basically, and it backs up to Nathanson Creek and Nathanson Creek Park. The project site's developed with a 35,965 square foot skilled nursing facility with 58 on-site parking spaces. There is an existing emergency generator. And so to the north is Freeman Brothers and, sorry, not Freeman Brothers. And that's wrong. Sonoma Valley High School and Traintown is to the south. So the applicable development standards are mixed use zoning district in the Broadway corridor. And this facility has been around for a really long time. As I noted in the staff report, a residential care home requires a use permit. This facility has been around since approximately 1968, so it is a legal non-conforming facility. However, at this time, the proposed improvements do require a use permit. And this is a little bit different technology than we're used to. This is not a traditional generator. It's more of a cogeneration facility. So there are microturbines that are fueled by natural gas, but it also recovers the heat and uses it to heat water in the facility. One of the, I think the really interesting parts of this technology is how quiet it is. Like I mentioned, we have had some issues with noise with other generators, and then the noise levels can be pretty high. This one is quite low. So the whole project includes new concrete equipment pads, some screens and trenches, things like that to do the installation. Here is the site plan. So over on the right is Nathanson Creek. So they did do a delineation of the top of bank. It's 200 feet from the top of bank itself and about 33.5 feet from the eastern property line. There's the spec sheet.
Christina, could you go back to the last slide and use your cursor to show where the location of the turbines are? There you go.
Yeah, it's right here. I know it's really small. Here's the elevation. So it's approximately 8 feet wide and 9 feet tall. And this is a picture of the existing generator, and those are the capstone, the microturbines that are just sitting in a parking space waiting to be installed. So similar to Wendy's project, we have the same noise standards for mixed use, and the generators are allowed an additional 5 dBA. The noise study for this project demonstrates that the microturbines are going to operate well below the city's noise standard of 45 decibels. The estimated noise level at 24 feet from the equipment is 38 decibels. And the property line is, as I mentioned, is 33.5 feet away. So the decibels are 35 feet at 32.8. So I'm hoping that this project coming through might help other people who are struggling with noise standards. And we have our use permit findings of approval. And other than that, that's our presentation. Can I answer any questions?
Yes.
Go right ahead, Mr. Barnett.
My question is, if I understand it, this unit runs on natural gas, which I assume is going to be a connection to the PG&E gas lines that come in, as opposed to a container or pressurized gas in separate containers. Can you tell me which one it is?
Correct. It'll be hooked up to PG&E.
Okay, and so then my second follow-up question is, when PG&E has these PSPS events and they turn off the electricity, do they also sometimes turn off the gas?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, I would just caution the applicant to query PG&E about this, because if there is a fire, I would expect PG&E probably would turn off the gas, because gas obviously doesn't mix well with the structure fire. And so I'm just, out of an abundance of caution, I would I would suggest they check with PG&E to find out what the likelihood of the gas being cut off in the case of an emergency, because that would essentially eliminate the chance to use this in the way they anticipate.
I assume they have this, that this is the sole purpose. It's my experience with power outages that we've had in town. The gas has never gone off. It's been, the threat is the wind events with the overhead power lines. If there was an actual fire, then that, you know, probably be a different story.
Yeah. Okay.
Christina, could you unshare? Thanks.
Any other questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, I'd like to then welcome the applicant if he is here to speak.
Did not see them on here.
Oh, Andrew Felton. Oh, no, he's lowered his hand.
For the next one, I believe.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then I will open it up to the public for anyone that may wish to speak to this item.
Sure, Chair Wellender, no one's raising their hand.
Okay, then I'll close the public portion and bring it back to the commissioners for discussion and possible action.
I make a motion that we adopt the resolution approving the use permit subject to findings and conditions of approval.
Second.
Further discussion? I would like to just throw out for consideration that even though the quote analysis suggests that the sounds are going to be well below the max levels, I would support the idea of having at least one test report done at some point down the road, 6 months, a year, to confirm that, in part just to continue to gain confidence that when we read these noise analyses, that they actually are true. So that would be my suggestion as far as amendment, if you are open to that idea.
So Sheila, do you, sorry, Commissioner O'Neill, do you accept his amendment?
Absolutely. Thank you.
And
very good.
Mr. Chair, if I
Commissioner
can,
Barbos?
Yes, Mr. Storm.
Yeah, what I'd suggest we do at that point then would be to craft a condition that says words to the effect that upon installation of the micro turbines, that within 30 days of their initial operation, that a report, an acoustical report, will be presented to the planning department to show that the noise contours are within those as prescribed in the staff report, and have that presented to the director.
Very good. So with that clarity, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Barbos?
Yes.
Commissioner Bohar?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner Wyrick?
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett?
Aye.
And Chair Wellender?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 8.6. This too is a consideration, discussion, possible action to adopt a resolution approving a variance. It also includes design review and demolition permit applications for a residence at 859 Austin Avenue. And with that, I'd love to welcome whoever's going to present this.
That would be me again, just trying to promote the applicants. I can figure out how to do that while I'm sharing my screen.
I'll do it.
Thank you. Can you promote Andrew Feldon and Lindsay Atkinson, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. My one job and I failed. Come on, Zoom. All right. All right, the application before the commission is a variance and design review for 859 Austin Avenue.
Did you turn on a heater? Okay.
Located just down the street from MacArthur Place. The project site totals 7,260 square feet and backs up to Nathanson Creek in the southwest corner. There's currently an existing 1,132 square foot single family residence. The original portion of the house was constructed in 1945 and was added on to after that. The primary reason for the variance this evening is the presence of two very large redwood trees located in the southeast corner of Austin Avenue. And the land uses surrounding the property are all single family residences and low density residential zoning. We are in the historic overlay, and the required setbacks are a 20-foot front, 5-foot side, 15-foot combined, and a 20-foot rear. In addition to that, we have the creek setbacks of 30 feet from the top of bank of Nathanson Creek. The applicant proposes to remodel and add on to the existing house. My understanding is because of the creek, they're going to be lifting it up and redoing the foundation so that the floor elevation's higher. I'll let them speak to that a little bit more. And we did prepare, the applicant prepared a historic resource evaluation, which is included in the packet, which determined that the residence is not eligible for listing and is not a historic resource. The project would comply with all required setbacks and even improve the situation where currently there's a legal non-conforming situation with the setbacks. All of the expansion would be towards Nathanson Creek. So there is a pretty limited area on the property with the setbacks to the creek in the back and then the required front 20-foot setback. The creek setback was delineated by a local engineer. And so the design review application would be for the exterior modifications. And the variance is to approve the lack of one covered parking space. When the house was originally built, it had a carport, which was filled in at some point in time. And currently there is no covered parking. And where the driveway is, that's where those two beautiful redwood trees are. And creating a carport in that location would be damaging to those trees. And the trees represent a unique feature to this property that is not, that it's unique to this property, and approving this variance would not give them any special privileges. Now here is the site plan. You can see the lines in the top left. That is the creek setback. And then the house is being built to the front setback line. So you can see there really isn't that much room on the property where they can build their addition. And to answer some questions about whether it's a demo or a tear down rebuild, the thick dotted red line, that's where the footprint of the existing house is. And there's some lighter red lines. I'm not sure if you can see where the interior walls will be removed and reconfigured to improve the living area. And then the shaded space is the proposed residence. And here's some elevations. This project was reviewed by the Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission in December, and they unanimously recommended approval to the Planning Commission. So we have both the design review findings as well as the variance findings. And staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission approve the variance and design review applications subject to findings and conditions of approval. Are there questions?
Yeah, just one quick question. In the agenda packet, there is a color photograph of what appears to be this house, but it looks like it's a photograph from the rear. Am I correct? This is accompanying a letter with the letterheads Andrew Feldon Design, November 5th, 2021. I'm just curious because it's obviously not the front of the house because there's no driveway, and so I'm just checking in to confirm that this is the rear of the house.
Are you talking about this?
Yes, and I had.
Here's the front. Yeah, actually, this is the front. So the driveway is over to the left.
I see. So the picture in the upper left is the house as it appears today?
I believe so. And I can let the applicant comment, but so the driveway is over by the redwood tree.
Okay, I guess I didn't, the other photograph I saw at the beginning of your presentation looked like a different house to me, but.
So I can share, I have some other pictures that I took today. This one's my favorite. So here's the redwood tree. I had to go way across the street.
Yeah, so that doesn't look like the same house.
I think that just the color might look a little bit different.
Yeah, this is green. The other one was yellow.
Probably just winter lighting, maybe.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Yes.
I thought the brightly painted, I'm sorry. Am I up or not?
Yes, please, Mr. Bohar.
Maybe I didn't look that carefully. I thought the light coloring was the new version of the house, no?
The proposed materials are, let me pull up the color board.
What would be the best page to present that?
I'm going to pull it up on my screen.
Okay.
That photo was just an old MLS photo from when the property was listed for sale a couple of years ago.
Which photo? The one with the yellow?
One with the yellow and the brick.
I see. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, Mr. Barbos.
I have a couple. First, in reading this application, it sounds like it's a complete demo and different house. And I thought I heard you say something about it's going to be jacked up and put on a new foundation or something.
Yeah, I will let the applicant comment on that. I'm a little bit unclear as, you know, we don't have what it's being termed, but the application is for a demo permit. It is going to be substantially remodeled.
Okay. The other question I have, and I don't have any issue with this, but I'm just trying to get clear. This has a gravel driveway next to the redwood trees, and I assume that's going to be there or the same material after this new house. And there was another application we had a while back where there was a statement to the effect that the city actually requires paved driveways, which I was disappointed to hear because you don't have any permeability with a paved driveway, whereas this gravel driveway is going to water those trees. So what actually is the status of that requirement? Do we not require paved driveways, or do we need a variance for that, or wait?
I am not sure. David, are you up? David or Wendy, do you have any comments on that?
I do recall what Commissioner Barbosa is talking about. I believe it was up on the more north end of town, northeast of the plaza, if I remember. There was a driveway that the Public Works Department had required it to be the driveway apron itself, and I think they also required concrete as well. We'd have to check back on that.
I raised my hand. I just maybe it didn't get seen in the last time, but I do have a comment about the gravel. I could answer that because I went through that process to get a building permit for my house, and I had a decomposed gravel driveway, which I was trying to make a way for us to be able to get the drainage situation on my property handled, because we were trying to avoid a significant amount of runoff. Despite my arguments with the building department, I was required to put in a concrete driveway. So they would not allow a decomposed granite driveway. That had been there since 19 85.
Okay.
If I seem to remember that the question was the apron had to be concrete, and the concern about the public works issue there was that public works could not require the on-site concreting of the driveway. They were concerned about the DG or other materials coming onto the public right-of-way and having caused damage that way. But again, I seem to recall that discussion.
Yeah, that makes
I think
sense.
you have to have maybe the first 20 feet, but that would be the redwood tree.
Well, I think there's a compelling reason for not requiring concrete, but I just thought we ought to address that. If we want to give them a pass on the concrete, I think we need to put that into any approval.
Christina, is the proposal to retain the existing driveway the way that it is?
That is my understanding. And sorry, my computer is frozen.
So I think at this point, if that is the proposal and the Planning Commission approves the proposal, that would be the statement of the Planning Commission that would be to retain that design component.
There definitely is there may be some issues with the sidewalk in the area. It looks like the roots are lifting the sidewalk up. There we go.
So I remember David writing a memo about this a while back, so I brought it up here about driveways is at the end. Oh, I just saw it.
Oh, you just went by it.
I know, I'm trying to get it back up.
There you go. Yep.
All right, so planning staff confirmed that the building department does not require a building permit for driveway, and driveways on private property are subject to review by the Public Works Department. And we're going to encourage developers to construct driveways using an alternate design material, utilizing water conservation techniques, and that projects which involve discretionary review will include the driveway materials in the entitlement. So as far as I'm concerned, Commissioner Barbos gets a gold star.
Well, it says gravel. Whoa, too fast. It says gravel is not. You jumped the last sentence on there. It says gravel is not an acceptable permeable material for a driveway in Sonoma due to negative impacts to pedestrians on the adjacent public sidewalk.
Yeah, that goes to my comment about Public Works having concerns about this gravel entering into a concrete situation and causing damage. But in this case, I think with respect to a variance, because of the sensitivity of the trees, it seems to me that this would be an acceptable permeable substrate.
I have a lot of comments because I spent some time on the site with it, but I think at this point I'd like to possibly defer additional discussion until we bring it back to the commission. I'd like to hear the applicant's presentation, and then by all means we'll have hopefully a thoughtful discussion about the appropriateness or inappropriateness of concrete versus gravel. So would the host please welcome the applicant?
They're there. Mr. Feldon, I guess, and Ms. Atkinson.
Welcome.
Thank you. Lindsay, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so Lindsay is the homeowner. She hired us to design this house. It's a 2-bedroom house, 2.5 bath. We definitely like the scale of the existing house. It originally had a front porch going all the way across, but one of the subsequent remodels, they pushed the kitchen out and sort of got rid of about 2/3 of that. So we wanted to restore that. With regard to the parking situation,
we do have these two large redwood trees. There is existing gravel there, which I'm sure has been there for quite a while. And then we do have a concrete sidewalk and curb cut. But we have, in addition to the 30-foot setback from Nathanson's Creek, the house is also, or the property is located in what FEMA calls a floodway zone, so that when the creek floods up to an elevation of, I think it's 72 feet of elevation above sea level, we're not allowed to have, or we need to mitigate any obstruction to that flood water. So that is the reason why we need to raise the floor level of the house approximately 9 inches from where it is now. And in so lifting the floor, we are actually able, we will be putting on a new foundation, because the foundation also needs the ability for floodwaters to flow through the crawl space. So the wood framing of the floor needs to be up above 72 feet elevation to allow water to flow through what would be otherwise vents for the crawl space. So in lifting the house up, we're actually able to move the house over and get it into the current setbacks without overlapping as it does now. But another aspect of the FEMA floodway zone is they are requiring anything that we can do, or one can do, to not restrict the flow of water. So putting in any sort of permeable surface, impermeable surface would affect the ability of the ground itself to absorb some of the flood water. There are obviously other permeable materials that one could use, but in this case, because we have these two gigantic trees with some fairly substantial roots, I would certainly be nervous to alter the situation that's currently there. Otherwise, we are doing the extension of the house to the rear. It basically would therefore align with the houses on either side as far as the amount of front yard and amount of rear yard. So we're kind of keeping within the fabric of what's going on the street. And yeah, this is a house for Lindsay, and she will be living there.
Well, thank you. Lindsay,
yeah, happy to answer any questions, other questions that come up.
I've got a question, just very simply. Are we demolishing the whole house and starting from scratch?
No, we're taking the roof off, we're taking the walls off. We're going to try to maintain as much of the existing floor framing of the house. Again, we have to lift it to put in the new foundation and then put it back down, and then we will build new walls and new roof.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had is just more out of curiosity. The packet that was delivered in, there were several duplications of elevations of 2 different styles and 2 different materials. And I know that you've apparently gone before design review already. I'm just curious, what is actually going to get built?
So
it's A2 and A2.
Yeah, it will match the materials board, which was shown earlier. It'll be a white board and batten siding with a metal standing seam roof in a dark gray color.
Okay.
So these, yes, in this material palette, these are the colors of the house.
So what was shown on A2 has been updated with this particular material palette.
Yeah, I would need to see A2 that you have been looking at to see the difference.
Well, actually, there are 2 A2s, and that's why I brought it up. I'm a little confused.
Yeah, there must have been an older one included. So we've had a lot of interaction with the planning department through this process.
Problem. Okay, that's the only question I had. Anybody else have questions for the applicant? Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could, if there's a response from Mr. Feldon or Ms. Atkinson, if there's a desire of the commission to preserve the trees and grant the variance, is it possible that for a certain distance behind the sidewalk, this is also to Christina, having been at the site, would it make sense to have maybe a certain distance behind sidewalk, curb and gutter, to have interlocking pavers up to and including, in order to address some of the issues of the DG not being a good surface for public works?
Yeah,
as it transitions?
Yeah, we certainly would not be opposed to that if we could find something acceptable, because yeah, Lindsay wouldn't want to have gravel on the sidewalk either. So we'd certainly be open to anything we can find to mitigate that, should it be an issue.
Maybe we would maybe recommend adding a condition of approval that the final design of the driveway approach be done in conjunction with an arborist.
Right.
Because there's going to be some discussions with the building department and ADA, and I'm not sure exactly where those are going to go.
Well, I've got some strong thoughts based upon my site visit today. So when it's appropriate, I'm going to be sure to express them regarding the tree and the gravel and the sidewalks and the curb and the existing conditions. So, but I want to make sure that we have any more questions to the applicant.
And I have another photo that's more helpful too. This one. Want me to take that off, Ron?
Yeah, that's fine. That's good. Okay.
Chair Wallander, there's no
yes.
other members of the public comment on the line, so you don't have to worry about anyone else raising their hand.
Okay, very good. Then no public, no more questions for the applicant. I'll bring it back to the commissioners for discussion and possible action. Yes, Ms. O'Neill.
I like this project. I think that this house is kind of sad right now, and it needs a refresh. And the whole street has been going through, a little bit of renovations at a time. Some quite grand. One a couple doors north of you that is quite large, but it's done really, really well. I think that you're working very well within the limitations that site proposes for you. You have the limitations of the street parking is not real abundant, especially with MacArthur Place down the street. But I think that this design is very in keeping with the history of the house and the feel of this neighborhood. So I just want to thank you for being so sensitive and thoughtful. And I really do like this design a lot.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Mr. Barbos.
I would just echo those comments. I like it quite a bit, and I think it's a huge improvement and completely in character with the neighborhood. I live down Patton Street, so I walk by there. I'm familiar with the area in general, and I think the design is very sensitive to the site in Nathanson Creek, and I just hope that there is a way to maximize the impermeability of the driveway so that we can get groundwater percolating down to water those redwoods.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barbos. Mr. Bohar.
I toured the site a couple of times, and I concur with the last two commissioners' comments. I think it's a delightful addition to the neighborhood that, as they pointed out, it's in transition and this goes in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then I would like to share a few thoughts. I did have a chance to spend a few minutes on the site and look at the existing conditions, and I'm sure the owner of the house recognizes that it's pretty special to buy a house with such large trees that really make the neighborhood. The concern I have is not an issue with granting a variance for not having a carport or a garage. My concern is being the applicant being forced to change the grades in and around that tree. If you recall the photo that Christina had put up on the screen that shows how these redwood trees have really flared up, and you've got quite a slope, and you can see it's kind of lifting up the gravel somewhat. I would discourage and not support the idea of any turf stone, any pavers, because reality is that given where those buttress roots are really exposed, you're talking about digging down, whether you're talking about putting in 4 inches of base rock plus a 2 3/8 inch paver plus sand sanding, you're going to be doing too much impact to those trees. I would be very disappointed with the Public Works Department if they insist upon their concern about gravel migrating onto the sidewalk. I think that there are other ways of addressing it. You can modify the grade right as it abuts the city sidewalk, but that's not thinking outside the box. And we really need to take steps to protect those trees. A case in point is right around the corner on MacArthur Place. There's a huge, I believe it's a Monterey cypress, where by golly, the city allowed to have a sidewalk actually route around that tree. This is another case where these trees are significant enough and they should be protected. So I would not support any change of the grade within the area from the south property line all the way 20 feet to the north, which would be within about 3.5 feet to the Acer palmatum, the Japanese maple. I believe that if there needs to be a new concrete apron, that concrete apron needs to be constructed with a very shallow excavation and put more steel, maybe a greater percentage of cement in to increase the compressive rate. But again, I would be very disappointed if we have what I would call limited thinking on the part of the Public Works Department. So I support the idea of granting this variance, provided that these the existing grades, even with the construction of the new house, be protected and not changed. And that's critical. That is absolutely critical. If you go to the site, you'll see that there is what is referred to as a buttress root that is already being shredded by what would apparently be, just traffic, tire traffic, which is understandable because it's a parking space. So the trees in the eyes of this landscape architect, who is not a certified arborist, but have been looking at a lot of trees from the last 40 years, they look healthy. We want to keep them healthy. And again, I will wrap up my diatribe about protecting those trees and open it back up if anyone wishes to comment.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Barnett.
I would just like to cast my lot with your comments and add the statement, as Steve Barbos knows, because he lives with some redwood trees on the edge of his driveway, that the redwoods are going to continue to grow. And over time, that area that's under the gravel and abutting the concrete is going to continue to get higher, and it's going to progressively lift that whole section of ground more, which means that any permeable concrete materials that are added to any adjacent area to those tree roots are going to, in time, all get lifted up out of the ground as well. So I don't think it'll be productive to replace the gravel with solid materials that over the next 10 to 20 years are just going to get displaced by the roots anyway. I think that you've got a natural ecology in this particular location, and if anything, if the situation begins to get somewhat problematic, I would suggest that additional gravel be added to the driveway to keep it level, rather than any attempt to control its height through construction techniques that would put in more permeable concrete pieces I think in the long run, it'll just be a waste of time because they will have to be removed as the concrete gets lifted up. So I think having trees like that is a superb feature to the property. And in my case, we moved into our home with a very large black walnut next near the house in the backyard. It's probably 75 or 80 years old. The circumference of the trunk is enormous. It's about 75 feet. And we ended up designing the house to go around the tree because we didn't want to remove it. And for those of us who appreciate trees, they're a priceless amenity on a property like yours.
So, Mr. Chair, David here.
Yes.
So as presently constituted, the application does not propose anything other than the DG. So you could adopt a resolution as to approve the variances and the entitlements being requested, and that way the DG stays as it is, as proposed by the applicant.
So, but I have concern about when it gets passed on to the next level of bureaucratic review, that being the Public Works Building Department. So that's something where I would like to at least express my concern.
Well, as we stated previously, the Public Works Department doesn't get to have the standard on a private driveway. It does get to regulate the public right of way, which in this case would be the driveway apron, if assuming that that's on public property and not private property. So they could require a new pour, for example, of that, but they wouldn't get to tell the Planning Commission you erred and that you should require a concrete or interlocking pavers. You have discretion to approve the DG as it's proposed.
Okay, well, currently it's not DG, it's just gravel, and I would support keeping it just, with that material. There is, though, I would like to go on record, at least be able to express to both the designer and the homeowner, there is a product out there called FlexPave, which is a pourable kind of product that if the Public Works Department has a hissy fit and wants you to replace the existing concrete apron, you may be able to use an alternate material like that. If not for the driveway apron, certainly for that portion of the city sidewalk where it is lifting up at the property line. And the whole purpose of that kind of material is just for such an application where you have unsettled subgrade that tends to move, and that you want the ability to have a material that can flex and yet still provide safe passage without necessarily creating a lift section of hardscape and then generate a potential tripping hazard. So I guess this is just my opportunity to hopefully have a discussion with the Public Works Department and see if we can be a little bit more creative around these very unusual but incredibly valuable amenities to the little town of Sonoma. So I've talked enough and would like to, okay. I guess,
Mr. Chair, if you open it up to the applicant, you'd also have to reopen it to the public as well.
Thanks how there was no comment from the public. I will be happy to do that. So if the applicant would like to speak again, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to get the name of that material again.
There are a couple of different pavers materials out there. One's called FlexPave.
FlexPave.
Which I can't think of the second one, but I will, when I do recall it, I'll somehow get it to you.
Okay, thank you.
You can pass. I can help with that.
Right.
And then, Mr. Chair, if you wouldn't mind opening it up to the public and then closing it.
Be happy to. At this time, we'd like to reopen it back up to the public.
No members of the public are raising their hand.
Thank you. I'd like to close the public portion and bring it back to the commissioners for possible action.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to adopt a resolution approving a variance, design review, and demolition permit for the applications of Andrew Feldon Design
That.
Second.
I heard a second. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Barbos,
Yes.
Commissioner Bohar,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner Wyrick,
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett,
Aye.
Chair Wellender.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Congratulations, good luck, and keep those trees healthy, please.
Thank you.
All righty. Now, we're going to continue on, and this is where we're going to do the little adjustment. We're going to skip down to comments from the commission and would like to recognize Mr. Bohar if possible.
Thank you, Chair Wellender. Good evening, commissioners. This evening, I'm resigning from the Planning Commission. This is the time in my life when I feel I need to devote more time to my family, my friends, my personal interests, and my business interests. My experience at the Planning Commission since 2017 has really been extremely interesting and meaningful to me. And I really want to impart that to you. I never really anticipated such a valuable opportunity for my personal growth and serving this wonderful town of Sonoma. I was a commission, back in 2017, I was a commission alternate for about 10 days before that very necessary reorganization of the Planning Commission took place. Since then, this organization has evolved into a strong and very well functioning group, always striving to enhance the interests of our town and its citizens, and that's what your group represents now. Bob McDonald, Bob, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
You want to see my, I'm sorry.
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. Just your smiling face. There's a cat crawling in through your window, by the way.
Oh, no.
You had such long experience on a city planning staff. You bring some valuable elements to the group. You seem to emphasize quality of life items, which may not be so obvious, but they're clear to you because you studied the matter so long. You also bring up a lot of other issues that, because of your planning experience, are perhaps a different aspect at look, and I think all the commissioners are really glad to have your view of things. Matt Wyrick. Matt, you there?
I am.
Where are you? Oh, I see you up there. You moved to another room. Youth. Your family connections and long standing here in Sonoma, and as well as your law enforcement background, I think are going to stand very well, and you'll bring a new, fresh look to part of the commission. I also think that you and I have exchanged a few chuckles and smirks during the meeting, and I see a sense of humor that's going to be coming to the surface. Maybe that'll lighten up some of the events of the evening. Thank you for that. Sheila O'Neill, you're the welcoming committee to the applicants, and you are the diplomat in the organization. Always show gratitude and appreciation for the applicants. As well, I think you can recommend a strong condition for an applicant, but at the same time, you present it in a way that makes it very acceptable to them, because they can appreciate that perhaps their project is being improved, but also you're bringing a benefit to the city. There's another element to Sheila, and she has a nice professional air, but beneath the dais could be some hand-tooled cowboy boots on her feet. And I've heard that she also drives a big dually pickup truck. Sometimes there's a horse trailer at the back, so there's another side to her. Ron? Where are you, Ron? Oh, there you are, you're hiding. You took over the leadership position from a very capable guy, Bob Felder, and you you have quickly taken over the reins, and knowing the rules, regulations, and the protocols, you apply them in a very kindly manner, keeping the meeting moving through its paces. I think you certainly showed tonight that you're a big fan of Joyce Kilmer, and you are the leader of the tree conservation group, as well as bringing your very valuable landscape architect to the fore in a lot of projects. You showed that continually, bringing up things that we need to know to complement some of these projects. Thank you very much. Steve Barbos, your legal background allows you to dig deep into some of these issues, legal and issues on the development code and the general plan are much more clear to you from your council experience. You can ferret out these very complicated issues and present them to us in a very clear way. My hope for the commission is that the public will have a better understanding of the work and efforts that you put forward. And I think what I'd like to see is a way to motivate our citizens to participate more in the meetings, either through television or coming in person. Again, this has been a great ride for me, and it's really been a privilege to be part of this group for 5 years, and I expect to be involved in other things around town in the future. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bohar. As I think I can speak for all of us, we've appreciated your contribution. We are disappointed that you're leaving us. However, we do understand and wish you nothing but the best. So again, thank you for your 5 years of service.
Can I make a comment, Chair Walden?
Yes, you can. This is open to, this is comments from the commission to commission.
Okay. Commissioner Bohar, when I first met you, you were well before you were on the commission, and you were just a public citizen trying to help make sure that Sonoma developed the right way. And you would come to the planning commission meetings, and you were thoughtful, and you were prepared. And those of us that were fighting some pretty caustic developers, we reached out to you for your help and your guidance, and you helped us, and you were always so professional. And then when you got appointed to the commission, I remember your first meeting. I remember you got attacked your first time sitting up on the dais by one of those so-called developers. It was ugly, and you just sat there quietly smiling, but you didn't back down, and you never back down. And I got to tell you, I am so impressed, and you always had my respect, and I'm so happy that I got to serve with you on the commission. Thank you.
Those are very kind comments. Thanks a lot, Sheila.
Mr. Barnett.
Jim, it's been a pleasure to work with you. I won't be insulted that you didn't single me out for any comments, because you're probably exercising your best discretion to do that.
Just a minute, Larry. That is actually not well. It shouldn't have been. I'm sorry. I was too anxious to. I moved over your name, so I'm going to make those comments right now.
Here, I thought I'd been spared.
Maybe you're the constitutional lawyer on this commission. I remember the Peterson this is actually from my notes. I'm not kidding you. I'm not making this up right off the cuff, but you've been of enormous help to me in consulting during these meetings, and I would be ashamed if I didn't bring you out. So I am. I remember the Peterson Mechanical situation where they were trying to build a hotel over there in 2nd Street East. Because of your experience with the council, you knew the intent of that zoning change over there, and that turned out to be a pivotal issue in people being aware of what happened there and why that project was not appropriate. And those are things that you continually do because of your deep background with the council and your knowledge, well, not only your experience with the council, but your interest in all of these things. Noting your comment in the IT the other day about the bike lane ought to be this or that style on Broadway. Well, I don't remember ever seeing you on a bicycle, but you took the trouble to make that comment on there. I would also add your presentations in the commission. Now, I've heard people call them orations and not presentations. They're so well grounded and they really reveal your thorough knowledge of the subject. And I think you revealed that tonight and in so many other meetings where we really rely on the scope of your understanding of how the city works and how it's worked in the past and how that applies to things. So thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. And I hope I've made amends.
No amends necessary.
Well, no. It was an oversight. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Would you like a rebuttal, Larry? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it has been a pleasure to work with you. I'm wishing you well in your life going forward. You and I have discovered we have some mutual interests outside of planning issues, and I want to, invite you to continue to talk to me both about things that happen as developments in town, but also about the Heart Sutra. If you want to sit down over a cup of coffee and talk about emptiness, and getting to know you has been one of the pleasures of serving on this commission with you. So I appreciate your kind comments, and I will end my oration here.
Thank you. Yeah, we do share a number of very eclectic ideas, and it's a lot of fun. Thank you, Larry. Okay, well, I'm going to sign off, and I'll let you guys finish up the meeting. Thanks again. Good night.
Thank you,
Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
So I don't want to preclude the opportunity for anybody else to have a comment beyond saying goodbye to Jim. So are there any other comments from the commission?
It's already gone.
I realize that, but I'm talking about comments other than those for Mr. Bohar.
I will say that I'm disappointed that our joint council meeting to kick off our housing element discussion is via Zoom.
I second that.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Please.
I've been talking to housing consultants about this, and I've been finding that they're getting more participation during Zoom than they got before because people don't have to put on their pants and come to a meeting. They can participate. So I'm really thinking that we're going to get some really great participation, even though it's going to be via Zoom.
Okay. Fair enough.
Maybe the case.
Seeing, unless there's any other comments, I'm going to then bump it back up to get issues update from our director, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thanks. So that was going to be my first item, was just mention and remind you about the joint meeting with your council regarding the housing element on the 25th. Notwithstanding the meeting that we had tonight, the content, the volume rather, and I guess also the content, a little bit disappointed that we basically only had applicants there tonight. So I'm hoping that's not a byproduct of this new wave of the pandemic that we're going through. So hopefully by the 25th, there might be some more clearance. And as Wendy says, hopefully people show up on Zoom. Second thing out of 4, we have the League Planning Academy that's coming up for planning commissioners. March the 16th through the 18th. It's in the seaside resort of San Ramon at the Marriott, I believe it is. So if you as commissioners would like to attend that, it would be great if we could get advanced registration in by Friday, March the 4th. We do have budget in order for you to do that, to attend. Again, that's actually, it doesn't say where in San Ramon, now that I look at it. But anyway, it's a Wednesday through, I think, a Friday, the 16th through the 18th of March. So please, could you let me know if you'd like to attend that? They don't have actually a program as yet, but Friday, March the 4th is the deadline for advance registration. Oh, it is at the Marriott. I've just seen my notes. Also, the City Council passed a resolution authorizing all of our meetings throughout February, I believe, up to February, the first meeting in February, via Zoom. This is in response to AB 361, which gives the power to the council to make changes every 30 days or so. On the 18th of this month, the City Council will have a joint Design Review Historic Preservation Commission meeting to talk about the function of the design review component returning to the Planning Commission. This concludes my comments, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for a robust meeting and a lot of material we got through tonight.
Thank you, David. Any other items for discussion? Well, I'm confused by item number 13 that says public hearing. I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to do with that one, so I'm going to ignore it, and I'm going to slip down asking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second it.
And I get a sense that we're all on the same page on that. I don't even want to vote. Thank you very much.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Stay safe, stay healthy. And,
Stay in your bubble.
Yes, and we'll see you around town, I guess. Thank you.
Not everyone.
Good night.
Good night, all.